Chapter 1337. That cultivator looked Xiao Hua up and down and said coldly, "Fellow Taoist, this question is very peculiar. If the demonic artifact doesn't come from demon-resisting valley, where else can it come from? Do you think demonic cultivators can forge such a quality demonic artifact?" Demonic cultivators? Xiao Hua heard this term for the first time and was slightly astonished in his heart. However, he wasn't afraid at all and said with a smile, "Demonic cultivators have a long history. If a demonic cultivator with profound cultivation can forge such a demonic artifact, it shouldn't be considered much." Although Xiao Hua was smiling, that laughter was clearly concealing his ignorance. Puffed. That cultivator laughed as expected and said while clapping, "Fellow Taoist, this viewpoint is indeed interesting. I have never thought of it. However, if a demonic cultivator really wants to forge such a demonic artifact, then he must have the materials to forge this demonic artifact. This demonic artifact's materials can only be found in the devil world. Where can we find them in the cultivation world?" Xiao Hua's face flushed red, and he argued forcefully, "Dawn Rain continent is vast and boundless. How can fellow Taoists assert that there aren't suitable materials? Of course there are substitute materials. Otherwise, where would demonic cultivators get their handy magic artifacts? But if it's the real materials, how can my Dawn Rain continent have them? This Dawn Rain continent's heaven and earth is filled with spiritual energy and not a bit of demonic chi. How do you want these materials to be formed?" Ridicule already appeared in that cultivator's mouth. Xiao Hua finally understood the crux of forging demonic artifacts and the formation of demonic artifacts materials. He was at a loss for words for a moment, but his eyes turned, and he said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist doesn't know, but it doesn't mean that my Dawn Rain continent doesn't have them. Fellow Taoist is right." That cultivator was slightly dazed, and the ridicule in his tone turned into approval. He nodded and said, "Sai, Dawn Rain continent's 10 great danger zones. Are they something we can covet? If there's some mysterious matter inside, even if there's demonic chi, I also wouldn't find it strange." 10 great danger zones? Xiao Hua was even more dazed and truly felt his inadequacy. However, he didn't dare to ask again. Hearing that cultivator's meaning, these 10 great danger zones should be something every cultivator could know. If he asked too much, it would appear superficial. Haha, that's precisely what I meant." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and laughed with an unfathomable appearance. "All right, fellow Taoist over there, please step aside. Fellow Taoist, after you." That cultivator very elegantly invited Xiao Hua to choose. Xiao Hua shook his head and said, "Since fellow Taoist saw it first, fellow Taoist has the right to choose first. Fellow Taoist, please go first." "Since fellow Taoist says so, I'll take a look first. And fellow Taoist, please." Xiao Hua had a smile on his face. He was embarrassingly short on money, so there was no way he could buy anything, so he naturally had to be cultured and refined. Admittedly, this demonic artifact wasn't of much use to cultivators, and its price was ridiculously high. However, there were so many people who came to choose and look at it. It seemed that if they didn't come here to take a look, they wouldn't be able to show off their profound cultivation. And, needless to say, even Xiao Hua, a small cultivator at the second layer of the chi refining stage, was full of curiosity towards demonic artifacts, so there was no need to say anything about the others. Xiao Hua took some time to find a demonic artifact that was similar to a spear tip. That demonic artifact's weight was neither light nor heavy, and it was in line with the weight of an ordinary person. However, when Xiao Hua held in his hand, he didn't feel anything at all. He squinted his eyes and carefully looked at it again and again. Apart from the pitch-black demonic artifact, he couldn't see any other peculiarities. This thing, why is there a crack behind the spear tip? Xiao Hua's gaze very naturally fell on the bottom of the spear tip. It seems that my spear tip also has a crack, and the bottom of that 5-star spear also has a trace of crack. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. Since this demonic artifact came from the Imperial Devil Valley, it was left behind from the so-called Great War of Immortals and Devils. Then, These demonic artifacts were also left behind in the Imperial Devil Valley after they were damaged in the battle between the Devil World and the cultivators of the Dawn Rain Continent. Then, when cultivators were cleaning up the battlefield, they brought these demonic artifacts out from the Imperial Devil Valley. That's right, Secmaster also went to the Imperial Devil Valley several years ago. His cultivation was only at the Foundation establishment stage, so he couldn't directly face the people from the Devil World. Presumably, he also went there for these things. Xiao Hua thought of Xiao Yuehong, and his heart became gloomy. He didn't have the mood to look anymore, so he threw the spear tip on the stall, got up, and left. After only walking 4 or 5 steps, Xiao Hua suddenly thought, since there are damaged demonic artifacts, then there must also be complete demonic artifacts. Just a fragment is worth 10 top-grade spirit stones. How many spirit stones would a complete demonic artifact cost? Soon after, Xiao Hua mocked himself. Perhaps only devil cultivators would pay such a high price to buy a complete demonic artifact. What the hell am I thinking about? Oh, that's right, I wonder if Senior she came. Ever since returning from Jingbo City, Xiao Hua didn't have the slightest bit of disgust towards Shi Wuming's forceful buying and selling. There was only gratitude. If it wasn't for the demonic spear tip, he really didn't know the result of his fight with Zhang Zhihao. Xiao Hua then circled the entire area, but there was no sign of Shi Wuming. In that day, Senior Nisi seemed to have said that he couldn't participate in this e-bazaar, so he came to e-bazaar. Also, because of some urgent matter, and because he couldn't say it out loud, he forced himself to sell the spear tip to me. Today, he naturally won't be here. Thinking, Xiao Hua stepped out of the demonic artifact area and walked towards the depths of E-Market. In the time it took to eat a meal, Xiao Hua encountered a few more things that needed to be bid on. One of them was a circular magic tool with countless runes lingering on its surface. With a push of magic power, the runes left the body and gave birth to countless flames, roasting the surrounding air until it was scorching hot. The bidders were 4 Foundation establishment cultivators. These 4 people also didn't wear the camouflage cloak and came forward with their original appearance. There was also a fragment of a magic tool, similar to a pipe, and it was still half a pipe. Xiao Hua was far away, so he couldn't clearly see the runes on this fragment. However, the bidders were actually 2 cultivators who were completely enthralled, so he couldn't see the cultivation level on it. However, the price was extremely high, far beyond what Xiao Hua could imagine. Listening to the whispers of the cultivators next to him, Xiao Hua knew that this magic artifact could only be controlled by cultivators above the Foundation establishment stage with divine sense. Even if it was just a fragment, its power was inconceivable, so the bidding price was extremely high. And to be able to pay such a price, or to be able to control this fragment, could only be a gold core stage cultivator. At that time, Xiao Hua looked at the 2 Foundation establishment stage cultivators in front of him, his eyes shining. He secretly thought that if he was one of the 2, then it would be great. He would immediately turn back and capture 100 Herbs Gates Jiang Fan, then take Xiao Xianrui to Yao Nong Peak for revenge. Unfortunately, just as he thought about it, Xiao Hua came across the 4th round of bidding. The 4th round of bidding was something Xiao Hua was interested in. It was a 2,000-year-old spiritual plant. Inside the space behind Xiao Hua's head, ever since he advanced to the 2nd layer of the aura refining realm, the tracing light ray was even more effective. The spiritual plants inside the space grew for 1 day, equivalent to 2 years of growth outside. Many of the spiritual plants were already 200 years old. If nothing unexpected happened, in another year, Xiao Hua would have a large number of 1,000-year-old spiritual plants. How to deal with these spiritual plants and what kind of price to sell them, Xiao Hua muttered in his heart. Therefore, when he saw a spiritual plant being auctioned, he naturally paid attention to it. This was a rather large stall with a lot of spiritual plants on it. A white-haired Foundation establishment stage cultivator was calmly standing behind the stall. There were also 3 cultivators standing in front of the stall with their hands clasped behind their backs. One of them was wearing a camouflage robe, so it was impossible to tell his gender and cultivation level. The other one was wearing an ordinary Taoist robe. He was about 50 years old, and his cultivation level was at the late stage of the foundation establishment stage. His face looked a bit miserable. The last one looked a bit sloppy with white hair. He was about 60 years old, and his cultivation level was at the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. Xiaohua had just walked to the left side when he saw the 50-year-old man, cupped his hands, and said, "I am 10,000 Flowers Valley's medicine master Sui. How should I address this fellow Taoist?" This senior is called Medicine Master Sui. Xiaohua was stunned when he heard this. Previously, he had heard the name of 10,000 Flowers Valley's medicine master Sui at e.g. It was said that he could refine the foundation establishment pill. He thought that his surname was Sui, and because he was an alchemist, he was respectfully called Medicine Master Sui. He didn't expect this person's name to be Medicine Master Sui. Just when Xiaohua was in a daze, the person wearing the camouflage robe spoke. This person's voice was a bit hoarse and also a bit sharp. It should have already been modified by the camouflage robe. I was here first. This 2,000-year-old Qilian grass is what I deserve. What qualifications do you have to ask I for my name? Fellow Taoist, what are you saying? Didn't fellow Taoists feel that one piece of top-grade spirit stone is too high and is still bargaining? Since the stall owner is not willing to reduce the price, and I and this fellow Taoist Lai are willing to buy it at the price of one piece of top-grade spirit stone, you can naturally bid according to the rules of Jingbo City. As for whether fellow Taoist is willing to announce his name or not, that is fellow Taoist's freedom. Of course, one piece of top-grade spirit stone is high. Normally, a 1,000-year-old main ingredient is only 100 pieces of top-grade spirit stone. Why is this 2,000-year-old spirit herb so outrageous? The cultivator was somewhat angry. The price of this 2,000-year-old spirit herb is not casually stated. If you don't believe me, you can ask fellow Taoist Lai. Medicine Master Sui laughed. This one is 100 herbs, sex, Lai Hong. The 60-year-old man cupped his hands and said, 100 herbs sect. When Xiaohua heard this, his eyes slightly shrank. Immediately, his impression of this old man changed greatly. No matter how he looked at him, this old man had the appearance of a rat. My country of Xi's exchange practice is that a 100-year-old main ingredient can be exchanged for a mid-grade spirit stone. A 1,000-year-old main ingredient's price is not 10 times, but 100 pieces of top-grade spirit stones. As for a 2,000-year-old main ingredient, it cannot be twice the price. As for the amount of spirit stones, it depends on the quality of the spirit herb. This Qi lotus grass is originally rare. Not to mention a 1,000-year-old, even a 100-year-old one is not commonly seen. Moreover, fellow Taoist must also know that the Qi lotus grass has other unique uses. I believe fellow Taoist is also aiming for this. A piece of top-grade spirit stone is really nothing. After Lai Hong finished speaking, he looked at Medicine Master Sui and smiled. Fellow Taoist Sui is also a kindred spirit. I wonder if what I said is correct. Chapter 1338. Hearing Lai Hong's explanation, Medicine Master Sui smiled and said, Fellow Taoist is right. This is the common market in Xi's cultivation world. I wonder, what do you think? If there are no objections, shall we begin the bidding? Jingbo City has already explained the bidding rules clearly. What objections can I have? The cultivator's voice was sharp and light. I don't understand. Usually, it's first come, first served. Why does it change in Jingbo City? The guest should follow the host's wishes. This is an unbreakable truth. Medicine Master Sui was happy to explain. Jingbo City's auction on the day of the exchange is based on the rules of the auction in the north of the city. It protects the value of the seller's item and also ensures that the buyer can make the best use of the item. It can be considered a great initiative. Fellow Taoist Sui has been to the auction in the north of the city. The cultivator was surprised. How can I go directly with my cultivation level? It was just my humble sect master who brought me there to broaden my horizons. That kind of grandeur, that kind of extravagance, the rarity of those items, the mystery of those treasures, it really opened my eyes. Medicine Master Sui sighed with emotion. The northern part of the city is the central area of Jingwa City. Only cultivators above the Aura's core stage can enter. That East City, oh, that's not right. It's the auction gathering. How spectacular is it? When Xiaohua heard this, he couldn't help but recall Fan Riguan's introduction, and his heart was rather filled with admiration. As expected, when the cultivator heard this, he fell silent. Lai Hong smiled and said, I've heard that in this auction, anyone can participate in the bidding. Everyone is dressed in a supreme grade bewitching robe, and whoever offers the most spirit stones will be called out. In the end, whoever offers the most spirit stones will get the item. It's really similar to this auction. We still lack a manager. The cultivator sneered. Why don't we invite the disciples of Jingwa City over? No need. Who knows how many bids there are in this auction? Why would the disciples of Jingwa City care? Just let them protect our safety. Lai Hong waved his hand and said, Our Qi lotus grass is only 2,000 years old. If it's 10,000 years old, only then would we have the right to talk to them. 10,000 years old? He would have gone to the north of the city a long time ago. Why would he appear here? The cultivator retorted. All right, let's exchange some pleasantries. Everyone should know the price of this Chilean grass, right? Let's start quickly. There are many good things on the day of the exchange. Let's go look around. Medicine Master Sui said with a smile. Seeing the two nodding, Medicine Master Sui muttered to himself and announced his price. The two of them also pondered for a moment. Chilean grass was finally won by the cultivator in the camouflage robe at the price of 1/2 extreme Great Spirit Stone. Looking at Medicine Master Sui and Lai Hong's disappointed expression and the cultivator's face that couldn't be seen, Xiaohua was secretly happy. He could definitely guess that the cultivator's face was absolutely helpless. He didn't make a move on Chilean grass that was originally 1 extreme Great Spirit Stone. In the end, it was actually 1/2 an extreme Great Spirit Stone. 1/2 an extreme Great Spirit Stone was 500 high Great Spirit Stones. Xiaohua was happy just thinking about it. Of course, how could he not be happy? He didn't know the effects of the Chilean grass, but a 2,000-year-old spiritual herb was calculated in terms of extreme Great Spirit Stones. Even if the spiritual herbs in his space weren't anything precious, couldn't 2 of them be exchanged for 1 extreme Great Spirit Stone? Then all the spiritual herbs, how many extreme Great Spirit Stones could he exchange for? Thinking about it, Xiaohua's saliva almost flowed out when he realized that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly wiped away his saliva as if nothing had happened. Only then did he realize who could see through the camouflage robe. Pill formula, crying sale. Is there anyone who wants to bid? A loud voice came from the side of Xiaohua. Pill formula? When Xiaohua heard it, he immediately quivered and thought to himself, Is there a mistake? There's really someone selling pill formulas? His reaction was still too slow. While he was still in a daze, the nearby cultivators who could hear the voice all swarmed towards the source of the sound. When Xiaohua came to his senses and rushed over, the small stall was already 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Moreover, behind Xiaohua, there were many cultivators who heard the voice and came over. Xiaohua could only watch from afar. The stall owner was a short and stout cultivator around the 7th layer of the Qi refining realm. When he saw so many cultivators being attracted by him, the small eyes on his face had long turned into small bean pods. His fingers that were as thick as radishes slightly rubbed against each other. Fine beads of sweat seeped out of his white neck that was filled with bulging flesh. Fellow Taoist, your pill formula. What is it? Can I take a look? An 11th layer Qi refining cultivator stepped out from the crowd. In fact, everyone had the same idea, but no one believed that there really was a pill formula here, so they just stood there and watched. Fellow Taoist, aren't you going to ask about the price first? The short and stout cultivator said with a smile. If it's a pill formula, I will definitely go all out to get it. Why ask about the price now? The cultivator shook his head with a smile, looking determined to get it. Fellow Taoist's tone isn't small. Another cultivator also walked out. Xiaohua recognized this person. It was Hunter Herb's Gate's Lai Hong. Io, it's Senior Lai from Hunter Herb's Gate. Junior greets you. That cultivator hurriedly cupped his hands and said, Junior is Xuanyin Cult's Wan Lei. Oh, so you're a disciple of Xuanyin Cult. I was wondering why you were so arrogant. Lai Hong nodded slightly. I wouldn't dare. My sect forbids its disciples from being ostentatious. Junior was just joking just now. Wan Lei was very humble and smiled apologetically. In this market, it all depends on the spirit stones. If Senior can take out suitable spirit stones, I definitely wouldn't dare to overstep my boundaries. You can just say that it depends on the spirit stones. If you take out real spirit stones, I won't be able to win against you. I'll just turn and leave. How could Lai Hong not understand what he meant? I wouldn't dare. Wan Lei shook his head repeatedly. Just as the two of them were talking, a few more people stepped out from the crowd, seemingly wanting to participate in the bidding. Lai Hong looked around. Other than the four of them who were dressed in camouflage, the rest were all Qi refinement cultivators. He could not help but scold them. What's the hurry? I came up just to check the authenticity of the elixir formula. Now that all of you are here, do you want to start the bidding immediately? Hee, we wouldn't dare. Senior Lai, please come up and appraise it. A few cultivators said in unison. Yes. Lai Hong was extremely satisfied. He turned to the short and fat cultivator and said, Fellow Taoist, can you let I take a look at the elixir formula first? The fat on the short and fat cultivator's face trembled slightly as he smiled. Of course I can. However, what price do you intend to pay? Lai Hong frowned and said impatiently, Ordinary elixir formulas are worth 500 superior grade spirit stones to 1 supreme grade spirit stone. However, these are all priceless. What's the point of saying this now? If you don't let me take a look at the elixir formula, how can you bid? 1 supreme grade spirit stone? The fat on the fat man's face was about to burn. He rubbed his hands and said with a smile, Then what about the incomplete elixir formula? It'll cost at least a few hundred superior grade spirit stones. Incomplete. Lai Hong's expression changed slightly as he scolded. You rascal. Can't you be more reliable? An incomplete elixir formula and a complete elixir formula are completely different. Every elixir has its own unique refining method and special incantation. If the elixir formula doesn't have such records, how can it be refined into a complete elixir? Senior Lai, look at my cultivation. I'm afraid I can't refine elixirs. This elixir formula is something I obtained by chance. How would I know if it's complete? It's just that there are missing pages in the booklet, so I think it's incomplete. The fat man said apologetically, but his expression didn't seem to be embarrassed at all. Take it out and let me take a look. My 100 Herbs clan has some reputation in the country of Xi. We definitely won't lie to you. Lai Hong was already impatient and said impatiently, Yes, I'll take it out now. The fat man smiled apologetically and clapped his hands. A thin booklet was handed over halfway. He hesitated again. Senior, if you look at the elixir formula, wouldn't you have learned it? Lai Hong looked coldly at the booklet and smiled. Then I won't look at it. However, if I take this elixir formula and realize that it's incomplete, I will definitely look for the disciples of Jinghua City to seek justice. By then, I'm sure you can afford to compensate me tenfold. But Senior is willing. The fat man was a little anxious. This humble Taoist is willing to do so. However, this humble Taoist wants a complete pill formula, not an incomplete one. This is something that all the fellow Taoists present can testify to. Lai Hong pointed to the surroundings and said, Furthermore, if it's incomplete, you should tell me where it's incomplete. Otherwise, I'll be deceived by you. All right. The fat man was helpless and could only hand over the elixir formula. Don't worry, fellow Taoist. I will only take a rough look. I definitely won't remember the details. Your elixir formula won't be leaked. Lai Hong took it and smiled. Senior Lai, please appraise it. The fat man cupped his hands and forced a smile. Lai Hong opened the booklet cautiously. He frowned and said softly, Yellow marrow elixir. This elixir seems to have been lost for a long time. Then, Lai Hong did not continue reading. He flipped through page after page. First, he frowned, then he was overjoyed, and then he frowned again. Finally, Lai Hong stopped reading and flipped to the very end of the booklet, where the booklet was incomplete. In the end, the expression on Lai Hong's face was interesting. Was it regret? Was it anger? Or was it regret? Then, Lai Hong flipped through the booklet again in detail. He threw the booklet at the fat man and said with a cold smile, "Fellow Taoist, are you making fun of me?" The fat man caught the elixir formula booklet in a fluster. His expression changed drastically as he hurriedly asked, "Senior Lai, this elixir formula, isn't it too incomplete? But I see that there are quite a lot of things inside." Ha ha ha. Lai Hong stared at the fat man carefully for a long while. He was so angry that he started laughing instead. Chapter 1339. In the boundless void, there was no light at all. All of a sudden, an invisible crack appeared in the void, leaving a huge mark in the void. The mark was either expanding or shrinking. The expanding crack was like a ripple on the surface of a lake, spreading in all directions. The surface of the lake was limited, but the void was limitless. Hence, the crack did not show any signs of stopping. The shrinking crack only expanded slightly before shrinking rapidly, returning to its original state. However, it did not stop, continuing to shrink without any signs of stopping. Until it shrank to its limit, it suddenly formed a huge void, swallowing everything around it. Then it shrank again, and then it disappeared. Hence, in this silent void, even though there was no sound, danger was everywhere. At some point in time, in an unknown location in the void, another normal crack in the void suddenly appeared. In the crack, which would not have any abnormalities, a slender human figure actually appeared. Immediately after, a faint light appeared on that person's body, and a flat light shield that was similar to the shape of this person suddenly appeared. Under this faint light, one could see that it was a young man of 17 or 18 years old. He had a high-nosed bridge, thin lips, and a pair of long and narrow eyes, just like the eyes of a phoenix looking down on all living things. It was a pity that these eyes were tightly shut. When this person appeared from the crack in the void, they had been tightly shut, and one could not see the elegance of opening his eyes. This person's eyebrows were extremely thick and slender. His brows were slightly furrowed, and he seemed to be in pain. Needless to say, this person was Zhang Xiaohua, who wanted to be sent to the ruins from the transportation formation in the forest. However, the plan could not keep up with the changes, or perhaps the road to happiness was strewn with setbacks. Zhang Xiaohua used a stone from the Crouching Ox Rock as a vitality stone to place in the groove of the transportation formation. He did not know the power of the vitality stone, and only released the vitality in the stone completely. The Crouching Ox Rock was born together with Zhang Xiaohua's bracelet, and the vitality in it was far from what a normal vitality stone could compare to. How could the transportation formation withstand when Zhang Xiaohua released all of his vitality? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was still in the transportation formation was first triggered by the huge amount of vitality, and the destination was completely messed up. The distance of the transportation formation was far greater than expected, and then, because of the collapse of the transportation formation, Zhang Xiaohua was squeezed into the spatial crack by the power of space. Together with Zhang Xiaohua was a yellow little mink and a black little dog. These two little things also had their eyes tightly shut and did not move at all. These two little things were Little Yellow and Little Black. Although their flesh and blood were not as mutated as Zhang Xiaohua's, they were still safe and sound within the light shield. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand was still tightly clutching a stone that looked like a longsword. It seemed to be a sword embryo. This sword embryo looked very inconspicuous, but the tip of the sword was hanging straight down, and even in the void, it was still very heavy. The light shield came out of nowhere. It was faint, but extremely tough, and covered Zhang Xiaohua's body. The crack created by the spatial crack rapidly shrank, and once it came into contact with the light shield, it could not shrink any further. Then, with a bounce, it expanded outwards again and disappeared into the distance without a trace under the light shield. Zhang Xiaohua's slender body floated slowly in the void without end. It wasn't as if there wasn't anything in the void. The void was filled with chaotic aura. Although the light shield around Zhang Xiaohua's body kept the spatial cracks outside, it didn't stop the chaotic aura from entering. Strands of chaotic aura seeped into his body, seeping into his meridians, seeping into his bones. Even at the back of his head, there was a mysterious place that actually produced a powerful suction force that sucked in the chaotic aura. Speaking of which, it was strange. The chaotic aura was the origin of all vitality and spiritual energy. If an ordinary person absorbed a strand of chaotic aura, it would be like an ordinary person eating poison. They would either die or explode to death. But Zhang Xiaohua's body actually consciously absorbed the chaotic aura. On Zhang Xiaohua's bones, there were a total of 13,200 tiny dots. His flesh and blood were formed by these 13,200 tiny dots. These 13,200 tiny dots, and his flesh and blood originally had some indescribable abnormalities. But after absorbing the chaotic aura, these abnormalities gradually disappeared, and his flesh and blood were no different from that of an ordinary person's. Looking at the bones covered by the 13,200 tiny dots, ordinary people would see them as gray. Even those who cultivated their bodies would see them as a crystalline white. But this person's bones, on those crystalline jade-like bones, were covered in red fine lines. There were so many fine lines that they actually took up 60% of the entire bone. Furthermore, as the amount of chaotic qi absorbed increased, the number of red lines also increased. The strangest thing was that the sparkling and translucent jade-like bones, as well as the crimson lines, were slowly covered by a layer of gray after the number of lines stopped increasing. In the end, the bones were no different from the bones of an ordinary person. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's blood vessels, there were actually traces of gold. Although the gold was very little, it was definitely there, and it spread throughout his body along with the bright red blood. Even this strange golden color, after absorbing the chaotic aura, slowly lost its original appearance and gradually turned red, blending into the surrounding blood. Also, in Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace, there was a round that was much smaller than a bean. There was a layer of golden light that was actually also absorbing the chaotic aura. Gradually, the golden light also dimmed and finally disappeared. The chaotic aura was indeed the origin of all vital energy. Everything that came into contact with this chaotic aura would become normal. The chaotic aura actually changed all the abnormalities on Zhang Xiaohua's body, and he became exactly the same as an ordinary person. The chaotic aura was not only nourishing Zhang Xiaohua, but also seeping into the bodies of the little black dog and the little yellow mink who were quietly floating beside him. Even the sword embryo had chaotic aura seeping into it. As the saying goes, years don't count in the chaos. No one knew how long this person had been in the void. Maybe it was a snap of a finger. Maybe it was a moment. Maybe it was 2 hours. Maybe it was a year. Maybe it was 100 years. In any case, Zhang Xiaohua continued to absorb the chaotic aura, and his appearance never changed. The only thing that changed was the light shield that protected him. As more and more spatial cracks appeared in the void, countless cracks struck the faint light shield, and the light shield became dimmer and dimmer. The light shield also gradually shrank, as if it was about to wrap him tightly. See, another spatial crack struck the light shield, and the light shield blocked it firmly without any damage. But at this moment, in front of the light shield, a spatial crack that had appeared at some point in time started to shrink. Suddenly, it went berserk, sucking in everything around it, including the light shield and Zhang Xiaohua who was inside it. Then, it shrunk rapidly and disappeared without a trace. The entire void was still calm. The light shield and this person were sucked into the rapidly shrinking dot, but they were brought to another void. This void was different from the violent void. This void was extremely quiet, and there were no spatial cracks. There was also the existence of any other space. This was the beginning or end of all space. This was an absolute space. Chapter 1340. Fellow Taoist, are you pretending to be confused, or do you really not understand? Lai Hong looked at the fatty with a cold face, then turned and left without looking back. What's going on? Xiao Hua was stunned from afar. Not only him, but the people around him, including Wan Lei and the rest at the stall, were also surprised. However, Lai Hong was an elder of the 100 Herbs Gate, and his forte was refining pills. Even he did not look at it anymore. There was definitely a huge problem with this pill formula. Fellow Taoist, Senior Lai has left. This pill formula of yours, let me take a look. Wan Lei thought for a moment, then went forward and asked, I won't look. I don't plan to sell it. The fatty was a little disappointed and wanted to keep the booklet. Fellow Taoist, you called all of us here, and now you don't plan to sell it. Who do you think we are? Wan Lei sneered. Your face was seen by all of us. Although the disciples of Jingpa City don't care about this, once you leave Jingpa City, before Wan Lei could finish, the fatty's face turned pale. He hurriedly handed over the booklet and smiled apologetically. Fellow Taoist Wan, please take a look. Wan Lei coldly received the booklet and casually glanced at it. Then, he snorted and threw the booklet back into the fatty's arms. He said, this kind of pill recipe only has the main ingredient, the secondary ingredient, and the refining process. However, it doesn't have a most important technique. This kind of pill recipe is simply a waste of paper. It's the same as this poor Taoist telling you that the foundation establishment pill is refined from exquisite grass. How much spirit stones do you think these words are worth? Moreover, the main ingredient of your pill formula, yellow grass, has long been lost. This pill formula, TSK. After he finished speaking, he also left. Liar. This bastard. Look at yourself carefully. You actually want to cheat your grandfather of his spirit stones. Many people who came up had fiery tempers and turned hostile on the spot. The fatty held the pill formula in his hands like a hot potato. No one knew what he wanted to say. When the surrounding people heard this, they immediately dispersed. Not to mention that there were only spiritual herbs in the recipe and not the most valuable incantation. The main ingredient of the recipe had already been lost. Even if they had the incantation to refine the pill, it would be useless. Who would stay for a moment longer? When he saw that everyone had dispersed, Xiao Hua was slightly hesitant, and he stood at the side and waited silently for a long time. After everyone had left, he stepped forward and cupped his hands with a smile. Fellow Taoist, let me take a look at your pill formula. The fat man was extremely disappointed and helpless. When he saw a cultivator whose cultivation he couldn't see through, he bitterly smiled and said, could it be that fellow cultivator is interested in the incomplete pill recipe? I just want to experience it. Xiao Hua laughed. Please, the fatty feebly handed over the booklet he threw on the stall. Xiao Hua took it, but he didn't look at it carefully. He casually flipped through it, then handed it back. He smiled and said, this pill recipe is really interesting. If fellow Taoist has the second half, it would be worth a lot. Fellow Taoist, please don't laugh at me. The fatty smiled bitterly. The latter half has already been burned by I. Where are we going to look? Burned? Why is that? Xiao Hua was shocked. Sai, let's not talk about it. I didn't know the importance of this pill recipe back then, so I just casually tore it up to keep warm. I also only saw the pill recipe a few days ago. The fatty was obviously extremely regretful. So it's like that. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and turned to leave. However, after taking a few steps, he turned his head and asked, all right, I want to buy this pill recipe of yours and take a look. Are you willing to sell it? Fellow Taoist, this is... The fatty looked at Xiao Hua, somewhat puzzled. This is a pill recipe that's like a piece of scrap paper. Everything has its value. This pill recipe is indeed a piece of scrap paper, but it can also be used as a reference. If fellow Taoist wants to exchange it for some spirit stones, you can name a price. Xiao Hua said calmly. Fellow Taoist, how many spirit stones are you planning to pay? The fatty asked back. Haha, fellow Taoist, don't think too much. If your pill recipe is worth a lot, I won't ask too much. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Sigh, all right. If fellow Taoist is interested, how about 100 high-grade spirit stones? The fatty hesitated and said, 100? Xiao Hua was stunned and shook his head. Fellow Taoist, you've gone crazy from wanting to get rich. Just pretend I didn't say anything. With that, Xiao Hua turned around and left, seemingly without hesitation. Sigh, fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. We can discuss the price. The fatty immediately chased out and pulled Xiao Hua's sleeve. How about 50? Just 50. Xiao Hua stood there and looked coldly. The fatty knew that he was waiting for him to lower the price, so he could only say again, Then 30? 30 high-grade spirit stones? Fellow Taoist, I only have 20 middle-grade spirit stones. If fellow Taoist is interested, then take them. Xiao Hua also didn't dawdle. He clapped his hands, and 20 middle-grade spirit stones were placed on the stall. 20 middle-grade spirit stones? Obviously, this price was out of the fatty's expectations and made him stunned. It seems that fellow Taoist is somewhat reluctant. Then I will take my leave, Xiao Hua said, and was about to use his hand to put away the spirit stones. Wait, the fatty decisively shouted. With a wave of his hand, he put away the 20 middle-grade spirit stones into his storage pouch at lightning speed. Then, he handed over the pill formula and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, thank you for your great kindness. Please take care of the pill formula. This, looking at the fatty's completely different expression from before and seeing that the fatty didn't seem to be depressed, Xiao Hua directly felt that he had been deceived. Cough, cough, fellow Taoist, please take care. The fatty cupped his hands and said, I already tore up the latter half of the pill formula. I have already regretted it for a long time. I only want to turn back time, but this is absolutely impossible. So, there's no use in regretting it. Today, this waste paper can actually be exchanged for 20 middle-grade spirit stones. I'm also perfectly satisfied. Fellow Taoist, do you think I's words are correct? Hee, contentment brings joy. You have to think positively about everything. Just this sentence alone is worth 20 mid-grade spirit stones. This poor Taoist has learned something. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and bowed, then left with a smile. Xiao Hua waited until they were far away and hid in a secluded place before he happily took out the pill recipe. Although this booklet was called a pill recipe, it was somewhat inappropriate. Ordinary pill recipes only talked about how to refine the pill, but this pill recipe had the characteristics of the main ingredients and auxiliary ingredients written down. The refining process was also very detailed. Xiao Hua originally didn't plan to buy this booklet. He only wanted to see what the pill formula looked like. However, when he saw the two main ingredients in the pill formula, yellow nightmare grass and supreme marrow fruit, his heart was wild with joy. Only then did he have the intention to buy it. Needless to say, the extreme marrow fruit was the main ingredient for refining pills. It existed in many pills. Although it was rare, Xiao Hua had already bought its seeds from E.G. and planted them in the space at the back of his head. As for the yellow nightmare grass that Wan Lei said had been lost, Xiao Hua had never seen it mature. However, this pill formula gave the seed of the yellow nightmare grass and its appearance as a seedling. Coincidentally, in the pile of seeds that Xiao Hua had obtained from 100 Herbs Gate, one of them was precisely the yellow nightmare grass. And this yellow nightmare grass in Xiao Hua's space had already revealed its seedling. Xiao Hua also looked at the seedling in the pill formula and thought of the seedling in the space. After confirming that it was indeed the yellow nightmare grass, he decided to buy the pill formula. As for the pill formula that was missing, Xiao Hua naturally didn't have it. Although this pill formula was incomplete, it was still a pill formula. Buying it for 20 middle-grade spirit stones, no matter how Xiao Hua thought about it, it was worth it. After carefully looking at it, Xiao Hua had a general understanding of the spiritual herbs used in this pill formula. Most of the spiritual herbs were available in his space, and only a few of them needed to be bought. After carefully storing the pill formula into his space, Xiaohua looked for a stall and began to buy spiritual herbs. There were many people in E.G. City, and there were many spiritual herbs. The price of many spiritual herbs didn't rise, but fell instead. Xiaohua used the time it took to eat a meal to find the remaining spiritual herbs. Moreover, he didn't spend a lot of spirit stones. There was no other reason than that this guy only bought the seedlings and seeds of spiritual herbs. It would be strange if they were expensive. Just when Xiaohua found the seedling of the last spiritual herb and was thinking about where to go next, a large stall appeared in front of him. There were a lot of spiritual herbs on the stall. There were also some healing and qi replenishing pills. Several disciples wearing the 100 Herbs Gates uniform were busy receiving the cultivators who were buying the pills and spiritual herbs. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He walked over, and a disciple greeted him with a smile. "Fellow Taoist, do you want to buy the pills on the stall?" "Hee, there aren't any pills to buy. I want to see if there are any 30-year-old black tubergrass. I want to refine some Peiyuan pill for the younger generation," Xiaohua said with a smile. "Oh, 30-year-old black tubergrass. It's a specialty of my 100 Herbs Gate. How many do you want?" the disciple said with a smile. Xiaohua's heart became colder. He asked, "How many do you have in your house?" The disciple was stunned. He looked back and scratched his head. "There should be at least 1,000 of them. Don't tell me you want all of them? Oh, if it's not enough, please give me a communication talisman. After E.G. City, my 100 Herbs Gates disciples will deliver them to the immortal mansion." Xiaohua didn't want to stay any longer. He turned around and left. "Ayo, fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist." The disciple was very confused. He didn't know what he said wrong. He was about to raise his hand to greet Xiaohua, but when Xiaohua left, another cultivator came over. The disciple immediately changed his attitude and greeted the person who came later. "Black tubergrass. Black tubergrass. 100 Herbs Gate seems to have a lot of it, but when I went to ask for it, they looked embarrassed and only gave me a very small amount. If I don't covet my Shang Huoming, I won't believe it even if you beat me to death. Jiang Jiantong. Just you wait." Xiaohua's eyes were burning with anger. After turning a few corners, he saw a dozen or so stalls not far away. They were selling a bunch of random things. Xiaohua had nowhere to vent his anger. When he saw the stall owner of one of the stalls, he couldn't help but sneer. He quickly walked over. The stall owner was a tall man with a pink and white face. He was about 27 or 28 years old, but his cultivation was only in the 3rd layer of the aura refining realm. When he saw Xiaohua coming over, he hurriedly greeted him. "Fellow Taoist, do you want to buy anything? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for it." Chapter 1341. This stall owner was, of course, that loose cultivator who set up a trap for Xuanyin School's disciple Xiao Mao. Xiaohua thought that after that day, he would go into hiding and avoid Xuanyin School. Who would have thought that on the day of the exchange, this guy would actually openly sell things here? But thinking about it, although this loose cultivator set a trap, Xiao Mao insisted on buying. If the loose cultivator's scheme succeeded and he obtained some secret of Xuanyin School from Xiao Mao's storage pouch, then he would naturally hide. Since he didn't succeed, the loose cultivator, of course, he wasn't afraid of anything. After all, this was Jingbua City, not a place where Xuanyin School could act recklessly. "Fellow Taoist, have you taken a fancy to something?" The loose cultivator didn't expect that Xiaohua was the cultivator who pulled Xiao Mao away that day and enthusiastically greeted him. "In, let me take a look. You have quite a lot of junk here." Xiaohua lowered his head and casually looked. Immediately after, Xiaohua's eyes lit up. The jade pendant that Xiao Mao took a fancy to was still in an inconspicuous place on the stall. Xiaohua casually pointed at a jet black sphere and asked, "Fellow Taoist, what is this?" "Oh, fellow Taoist really has good eyesight. This is a demonic tool from Demon Resisting Valley. Eye's cultivation is shallow, so I don't know its specific power. Only someone with a profound cultivation like fellow Taoist is qualified to know, right?" The loose cultivator laughed. "And what's the price?" Xiaohua calmly asked. This This demonic tool was originally put here by a fellow Taoist for sale. He gave a price of 1 top-grade spirit stone, but it has been here for a long time and no one knows its value. If fellow Taoist takes a fancy to it and really wants to take it, then give me 900 top-grade spirit stones, and I'll let fellow Taoist take it. The loose cultivator said very sincerely. Xiao Hua didn't have any emotion in his voice. He picked up the black sphere, looked at it again, and then threw it on the stall. The loose cultivator couldn't see Xiao Hua's expression clearly. Seeing Xiao Hua look at other items, a trace of disappointment flashed across his face. Xiao Hua picked up a few more items, looked at them again, and inquired about their prices. That rogue cultivator gave unimaginable prices. Finally, Xiao Hua threw away the items in his hand and sneered. Fellow Taoist, I sincerely came to buy things. Why does fellow Taoist keep randomly bidding? If it was just once or twice, then perhaps fellow Taoist's eyes weren't good enough. But every time you say something like this, aren't you afraid that I will report this to Lake Mirror City? Fellow Taoist, I personally spent a large sum of money to purchase these things. How could I deceive you? The rogue cultivator said unhurriedly. If this thing is fake, I will be the first to look for the disciples of Jingbua City. Seeing how shameless this rogue cultivator was, Xiao Hua could only shake his head in his heart. He casually picked up a heart-shaped jade pendant and said with a smile, What about this? Fellow Taoist, you really have a good eye. This is a rare jade talisman. However, due to the strict requirements of using it, the price is slightly higher. It's only 700 top-grade spirit stones. The rogue cultivator seemed to have nothing to fear. Or perhaps this jade pendant was really a jade talisman. Oh, what is it? Xiao Hua showed great interest. He didn't put down that jade pendant, but instead held in his hand and observed it. Soon after, he looked at another walnut-sized, light red object and asked curiously, This is also a demonic artifact. Fellow Taoist, you're really unique. You saw I's treasure at a glance. To tell the truth, this is a demonic beast's inner core. This thing can only be found in the northern part of the city. Because I came to East City with great difficulty, I reluctantly took it out. The rogue cultivator said solemnly. If fellow Taoist takes a fancy to it, you can, Xiao Hua interrupted. What do I want this inner core for? It's not like it can be used to refine pills. Xiao Hua recalled what Xiao Yuehong said before and knew that this inner core had extremely few uses in the Daybreak continent. Fellow Taoist's words aren't quite the same as yours. The rogue cultivator looked left and right and said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist, do you know why the northern part of the city has so many inner cores, but the southern part of the city has almost none? Xiao Hua was greatly surprised and said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist knows. That's because the pill formula for using demonic beast's inner core to refine pills is only available to cultivators above the gold core stage. Otherwise, with so many demonic beasts dying in the Daybreak continent every day, where would their inner cores go? The rogue cultivator did his utmost to lower his voice, as if this was an extremely big secret. Xiao Hua's heart moved. Yes, what Xiao Yuehong said was reasonable, but he was a foundation establishment cultivator after all. Shanghua Ming sect was also small, so what he knew might not be true. Therefore, Xiao Hua also held that inner core in his hand, seemingly hesitating about something. Seeing this, the rogue cultivator's face was filled with joy, but his eyes were extremely sincere. Oh, right? Is this a jade pendant? Xiao Hua pointed with his finger. It was precisely Xiao Mao's jade pendant. This, the rogue cultivator stared blankly. Soon after, he hesitated slightly and said with a smile, This is also a jade talisman. Fellow Taoist, you really have a lot of jade talismans here. Xiao Hua said as he picked up that jade talisman. How much is this jade talisman? Not much. It's only a top-grade spirit stone. Before that rogue cultivator finished speaking, another cultivator squeezed in from the side and immediately called out, Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious, this jade talisman. I already saw it before. Xiao Hua was both shocked and expected. When he turned his head to look, sure enough, it was that person who acted with the rogue cultivator last time. Huh, could it be that fellow Taoist wants to compete with I? Xiao Hua said with a frown. That's right. Just now, this fellow Taoist bid a top-grade spirit stone. I thought about it for a long time and decided to take it. If fellow Taoist clang, Xiao Hua sneered and threw that jade pendant on the stall. He turned his head and said to the stall owner, Fellow Taoist, I don't want this jade talisman. I'll let this fellow Taoist have it. Soon after, he looked at the two things in his hand and asked, These two things, can you let I have a bit of discount? The cultivator, who came later, was in a difficult situation. The few cultivators who were watching at the side were also slightly stunned. They originally thought that they would be able to see a lively bidding scene, but they couldn't help but feel disappointed. Hee, fellow Taoist came first. I'll trade with fellow Taoist first. Fellow Taoist, this jade talisman. You should wait for a moment. The rogue cultivator beamed with joy and said to Xiao Hua and the rogue cultivator, who just came. At this time, several people came in front of the stall. Seeing that Xiao Hua seemed to want it, this rogue cultivator didn't relent and only bid on a piece of half-top grade spirit stone. Xiao Hua was bewildered. He really didn't know what this rogue cultivator was thinking. This thing, this price, how can anyone buy it? Then, Xiao Hua did something that the rogue cultivator didn't understand. First, he took off the storage pouch from his waist. After looking, he shook his head and brushed the jade pendant and inner core in his hand towards the rogue cultivator's stall. He held the storage pouch in his hand, scratched his forehead, and said, Forget it, since fellow Taoist has no intention of selling and I don't have any extra spirit stones in this storage pouch. Then forget it. I'll take my leave. After speaking, without waiting for the rogue cultivator to react, Xiao Hua walked away. Fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist. The rogue cultivator was slightly surprised and hurriedly chased out and shouted, Fellow Taoist, this price can be negotiated. Why would Xiao Hua care about him? He didn't even turn back. Io, something's wrong. Fellow Taoist. Chong Feng. Not good. The jade pendant. The jade talisman is gone. The cultivator behind the rogue cultivator suddenly shouted, It's that cultivator's trick just now. Quickly go and catch him. Hearing this, the rogue cultivator's face immediately changed. He jumped up and said loudly, You little thief. Stop. You actually dare to take I's jade talisman. Saying this, he hurriedly chased in the direction of Xiao Hua. Little thief? Jade talisman? That rogue cultivator's voice was quite loud, and the surrounding people all heard it. And in this East City, this kind of thing was extremely rare, so they all unconsciously stopped and looked on with interest. Xiao Hua originally didn't go far. Hearing the rogue cultivator's shout, he unconsciously stopped and turned his head in surprise. He pointed at his nose that was covered by the mist and said, Fellow Taoist, are you talking about I? Of course I'm talking about you. Can it be anyone else? That rogue cultivator grabbed Xiao Hua's wrist and said loudly and fiercely, Io. Hearing this, Xiao Hua was also furious. When did I take your jade talisman? Didn't I put the jade talisman in your stall? Oomph, you make it sound nice. You're the only one who came to I's stall and picked it. If you didn't take it, who else would have taken it? The rogue cultivator immediately thought of Xiao Hua's strange action of taking out his storage bag. He pointed to Xiao Hua's waist and said, The jade talisman is definitely in your storage bag. While the rogue cultivator and Xiao Hua were talking, they pushed and pushed to the front of the stall. At this time, there were already many cultivators watching the show. That rogue cultivator grabbed Xiao Hua's wrist and didn't let go. His eyes roughly looked at the stall, and indeed, the jade pendant just now really was gone. How is it? Fellow Taoist, I's jade talisman is really gone. If fellow Taoist doesn't take out the jade talisman, then give I 2 top-grade spirit stones, and this matter will be settled. Xiao Hua said angrily, I didn't take your jade talisman at all. How do you want to take it out for you? It's fine if you can't take it out, as long as you take out 2 top-grade spirit stones. The rogue cultivator said proudly. I didn't take your jade talisman. Why should I give you top-grade spirit stones? Xiao Hua shouted. Besides, I don't have enough spirit stones here. Hee hee. That's even better. Either leave your storage bag, or I will call the disciples of Jinghua City and let them uphold justice. The rogue cultivator said with a sneer, If I's jade talisman is found in your storage bag, either you take out 10 times the compensation, or, hee hee, your cultivation base will be abolished. And I see that your jade talisman is not bad. It's barely worth 10 jade talismans. You. Xiao Hua's tone was a little helpless, a little angry, and a little timid. Humph, when lousy mingled in this market. The rogue cultivator wanted to say something senior, but he couldn't see Xiao Hua's face and didn't know his age, so he didn't continue. Then he patted his storage bag, took out a message talisman, and threatened, You still won't take it. Chapter 1342. As soon as Zhang Xiaohua and the light shield entered the space, a pouch-like object floated out from Zhang Xiaohua's chest. The pouch exploded soundlessly, and a space of several hundred feet in size appeared within the light shield. Countless objects flew around in the space. There were jade slips, jade stones, jade boxes, a bell, a sword, an axe, a pagoda, a zither, a cauldron, a seal, a mirror, a pot, and 2 stones. One of them was extremely large, like a crouching cow, while the other was extremely small, emitting a faint yellow light. At the same time, a waist-like object on Zhang Xiaohua's waist also exploded soundlessly, and a space of several hundred feet in size appeared. Within the space, even more objects flew out. There were countless spiritual herbs, countless jades, and many other strange objects, including a pitch-black flag, a 9th-grade lotus throne, and a 9-section bamboo. Following that, a ring-like object on Zhang Xiaohua's left hand also exploded, and a space that was 100 times larger than the previous 2 appeared at the same time. However, the objects in this space all carried traces of black gas and crimson light. Similarly, after the ring-like object exploded, Zhang Xiaohua's left hand opened slightly, and a round bead flashing with countless lightning bolts suddenly appeared from his left hand. Following that round bead was a human-shaped stone statue. At this time, the stone statue's facial features were basically formed, and it was extremely similar to Zhang Xiaohua's face. This stone statue had obviously absorbed the chaotic qi, and the chaotic qi within it was extremely dense. That was not the only strange thing. On his left wrist, a bracelet with the same 36 round beads also flashed brilliantly, as if it was about to explode. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. The 3 spaces overlapped, and all the strange objects in the 3 spaces were mixed together, quietly floating in the overlapped spaces. When the 3 spaces overlapped, wouldn't it be tens of thousands of feet in size? Just as the 3rd space appeared, the entire light shield flashed slightly and was about to expand. However, just as the light shield extended outwards, an unparalleled spatial force came pressing down on it. This was an absolute space, the end of all space. How could it allow another space to exist? In the blink of an eye, the tens of thousands of feet of space was tightly compressed together, tightly sticking to Zhang Xiaohua's body. When the spatial force came, all the elixirs, pills, jade stones, jade boxes, and jade bottles within the light shield and within the space were reduced to extremely small particles, becoming the purest yuan qi of heaven and earth. The 10 extraordinary objects, the bell, sword, axe, pagoda, zither, cauldron, seal, mirror, pot, and stone, had a mysterious connection. When the huge force came, they suddenly emitted a faint brilliance. That brilliance pierced the 10 objects together and held up a small space. In the center of this space, there was a heart-shaped object emitting a faint yellow brilliance. This object had appeared in the space after a jade box exploded. Around this yellow heart-shaped object, there were 7 different colored beads floating in a mess. Outside these beads, there was another bead running around like the wind. Following this wind-like bead, there was another bead full of fog. Not only that, at the top of the space, next to a black and white object that looked like a fruit, there were 3 beads. One was pale white, one was pitch black, and the last one was the one that had flown out from the young man's left hand. It was the bead that flashed with endless lightning. These strange objects were originally not together, but gradually they were pressed together by the increasing power of the space. As the power of the space increased, the brilliance of the 10 objects gradually dimmed. The 36 beads in Zhang Xiaohua's left hand seemed to be expanding and contracting slightly, as if they were about to explode. The brilliance of the bell, sword, axe, pagoda, zither, cauldron, seal, mirror, pot, and stone dimmed. The 36 beads were like ripe fruits suddenly exploding. At this moment, a dot of light, or perhaps a speck of light, quietly appeared outside the light barrier. That dot of light was abnormally lonely. It had nothing to do with the void. In an instant, it streaked across this absolute space. Just as it was about to enter the void again, that light entered the light barrier, quietly floating behind the young man's head, a mysterious place. The moment that dot of light entered the mysterious place, it brought with it a great suction force. At the same time, the 36 beads on Zhang Xiaohua's wrist exploded soundlessly, and an even bigger space appeared. In the absolute space, with the appearance of the space, an even greater power of the space pressed down. With this suction and pressure, everything within the light barrier, including the space, followed the dot of light and entered the mysterious place behind the young man's head. In an instant, everything within the light barrier was swept away. Only the little black dog and the little yellow mink were left, and the sword embryo in the young man's hand was slightly loosened. Yes, the young man's clothes and hair had already turned into dust when the power of the space pressed down. Other than that, nothing had changed. Nothing had changed within the light barrier, but the mysterious place behind the young man's head had an astonishing scene. It was a pitch-black place without a single ray of light. In the pitch-black darkness, there was an abundant aura of life. A ray of light flashed by. It was the dot of light that had suddenly intruded. That dot of light was different from light. It did not scatter in all directions, but only went straight forward. Therefore, that ray of light could not illuminate the entire space, nor could it reflect the dragon-shaped soul essence above the space, nor could it reflect the phoenix soul essence below the space. When that dot of light entered the pitch-black place, the entire place fell into a state of silence. It was comparable to the absolute space outside the light barrier. That dot of light seemed to be going straight, but also seemed to be motionless. All of a sudden, the light spot underwent a strange change. First, it continuously vibrated and emitted a mysterious ripple that instantly spread throughout the entire mysterious area. The light spot turned from extremely bright to endless darkness in an instant. It was even darker than the pitch-black area. Soon after, it turned transparent, after which it turned red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, all the way to purple. Every color evolved into a ripple that spread throughout the entire space. Finally, the purple color lasted for the longest time, and the ripple was the most intense. All the auras in the entire mysterious area began to vibrate. As if they were boiling after the purple color passed, the entire place stopped trembling again. Chapter 1343. The third layer Qi refining loose cultivator slapped his storage pouch and took out a summoning talisman. He threatened, "Are you going to take it or not? If you don't blame I for turning hostile. As long as the disciples of Jingbo City come, you'll definitely be in trouble." Then, he said in a low voice, "I have people above me. Humph, if this matter reaches Jingbo City, I guarantee you won't be able to bear the consequences." Hearing this, Xiaohua immediately understood why this loose cultivator was acting like this. He couldn't help but hesitate. But now that things have come to this, how do you want me to take it out? Humph, Xiaohua hardened his heart and slapped his storage pouch with his empty right hand. He also took out a summoning talisman. It was given to him by the Jingwa City disciple when he entered the city. He urged his magic power, and a crimson light directly flew into the air. With a pu sound, a red shadow appeared. That shadow flew up with extreme speed and crashed into a transparent light screen with a hua sound, then disappeared. The crimson light then flew back into Xiao Hua's hand. As expected, this summoning talisman could be used multiple times. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. The loose cultivator originally took out his summoning talisman first, but he didn't expect Xiao Hua to be one step ahead of him. He couldn't help but feel ashamed and angry. Do you want to die? The loose cultivator exerted strength in his hand and said fiercely. Yes, do you want to die? Xiao Hua flipped his wrist and nimbly broke free. He also grabbed the loose cultivator's wrist and exerted a bit of strength. He sneered. The loose cultivator screamed loudly, like a pig being slaughtered. What happened? Who sent the summoning talisman? A voice leisurely came. Then, a curved and flat shadow was projected into the air above Xiao Hua and the others. Xiao Hua flung his hand, and the loose cultivator was thrown to the ground. He cupped his hands and said, reporting, fellow Taoist, Guard Su, quickly take responsibility for I. This guy actually caused trouble in Jingwa City's E-City. Not only did he steal I's talisman, but he also used his magic power to deal with me. The loose cultivator shouted loudly. Humph, is there such a thing? Bodyguard Su was twisting and turning in the shadow like a snake, which was very strange. I'll let Guard Su know that this guy is just making things up. I only took a look at the jade talisman at his stall and didn't take it away. Also, I know that it is forbidden to use magic power to fight in Jingwa City. Just now, I didn't use any magic power at all. Xiao Hua said neither haughtily nor humbly. You dare to say no? Guard Su, look, I's wrist is still bruised. It's the evidence of this bastard's crime. The rogue cultivator struggled to say. Guard Su ignored his words and stared at Xiao Hua for a moment before asking, did fellow Taoist take Chong Feng's jade talisman? I didn't take it. Xiao Hua shook his head. Well, then can you let I have a look at your storage bag? Guard Su said calmly. No problem. Guard Su, please take a look. Xiao Hua calmly handed over the storage bag. Wait a moment. As Guard Su spoke, a burst of blue brilliance flashed around his body. It was abnormally dazzling. Immediately after, there was a light pop sound, as if a bubble had burst. Guard Su's figure appeared in midair. Guard Su landed and took Xiao Hua's storage bag. After opening it, he frowned slightly. No, the inside was really too small. Apart from some mid-grade spirit stones, there were some yellow talismans and spiritual herbs. There were very few things, and it was very easy to distinguish. After looking at it a few more times, Guard Su handed the storage bag back to Xiao Hua. Upon seeing this, Chong Feng was also bewildered and said in a low voice, Guard Su, this could it be that there isn't anything in the storage bag? There isn't. Yes, there definitely is. This guy took it with him. Chong Feng immediately pointed at Xiao Hua's maze and said, the spirit talisman is hidden in the maze. It's definitely not easy to find. But I don't have a right. Moreover, my Jingwa City also doesn't have a right to make this fellow Taoist take off the maze. And with I's cultivation, I also can't see through this fellow Taoist maze. Guard Su was somewhat embarrassed and said with a frown, Chong Feng, this jade talisman of yours, there are many left and right. How about, what does Guard Su mean? Chong Feng said with a smile, could it be that you want to indulge this guy? If Captain Zhang was here, he definitely wouldn't say such words. And okay, I understand. Guard Su smiled somewhat bitterly. He raised his hand. An array of light hit the air. Similarly, it was the same as Xiao Hua's message talisman. The blue light flickered and then disappeared. Then, he turned his head and said to Xiao Hua, fellow Taoist, please wait a moment. Today it just so happens that Captain Yang is on duty. I invite him to uphold justice. I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Su. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, Su, Guard Su, that isn't Captain Zhang on duty today? Where'd he go? Chongfeng's expression was somewhat unfriendly as he asked softly, "There's a grand auction in the north of the city today. Captain Zhang was transferred over," Guard Su said with a smile. "Why didn't Guard Su?" "Alas, since it's Captain Yang's turn, how could I dare to trouble him with such a small matter? I will have a good talk with his fellow Taoist, and this matter will be settled," Chong Feng said sincerely. "I naturally don't care. It still depends on this fellow Taoist," Guard Su said with a smile. How can that be? What fellow Taoist Chong lost is a jade talisman. It's worth 2 pieces of top-grade spirit stones. If you can't find it, how can it be good? Besides, even if fellow Taoist Chong gives up, this poor Taoist can't just let it go. This poor Taoist was framed for no reason. If I don't get to the bottom of this poor Taoist's reputation will be ruined. Xiao Hua sneered. But maybe I saw wrongly just now. I didn't lose any jade talisman. Chong Feng was somewhat flustered and defended himself forcefully. At that time, there were also many cultivators at fellow Taoist stall, but why did fellow Taoist insist that it was I? If fellow Taoist didn't lose it, then take out the jade talisman that I saw. Xiao Hua didn't give in at all. Chongfeng's expression was uncertain, and he slightly glanced at his stall behind him. At this moment, with a shout, a red-faced old man holding a sickle-like object appeared in midair. Behind him, there was a beautiful middle-aged woman and a middle-aged cultivator. As soon as the old man appeared on the spot, an enormous pressure came crashing down. A golden core cultivator, feeling an even stronger pressure than Xiao Yuehong's. Xiao Hua was somewhat shocked. However, the old man's pressure immediately withdrew, and he floated down from midair. "Greetings, senior." Not only Guard Su, but Xiao Hua and the others all bowed in greeting. Only a few cultivators who were enthralled, or whose cultivation couldn't be seen, stood proudly to the side. On behalf of City Lord Liu, I welcome fellow Taoists to Jingbo City." The old man waved his hand and said with a smile, "No matter what happens here, I will give everyone an explanation, and give City Lord Liu an explanation." Everyone responded and stood up. The old man turned his head and asked Su Ziqing, "What happened here?" "Greetings, Senior Yang, Senior Shui, and Senior Zhao." Guard Su stepped forward and bowed to the 3 people again. After the 3 nodded, he explained the matter and finally said, "Because this fellow Taoist is enthralled, this junior's cultivation isn't enough to see through it. So I asked Senior Yang to come and uphold justice. Moreover, this junior didn't expect Senior Shui and Senior Zhao to come together. That's even better. And is it this fellow Taoist?" The old man surnamed Yang looked at Xiao Hua with interest. Xiao Hua saw that the sickle in the old man's hand was very familiar, and when he heard the old man's voice, he suddenly remembered that this old man was the one who flew up from the lake to warn him that day when he was talking to Fan Riguan by the lake. "Yes, it is this junior." Xiao Hua bowed in greeting. Hand over your storage pouch," the old man surnamed Yang said with a slight smile on his face. "Yes, please examine it, senior." Xiao Hua respectfully handed over the storage pouch. The old man, surnamed Yang, took the pouch, opened it, and handed it over to the 2 people behind him. The 2 of them took it, looked at it separately, gave each other a meaningful glance, and handed the storage pouch back to Xiao Hua. Then they looked around and asked, "How is it? Did the 2 of you see any jade talismans on this junior's body?" Reporting to Captain Yang, this subordinate just listened to Guard Su's words and has already examined this person's body. "There isn't any jade talisman's spiritual power," the 2 of them said in unison. "And it's the same as what I saw." The old man surnamed Yang nodded and said to Guard Su, "Guard Su, did you hear?" "Yes, this junior understands." Guard Su turned his head and said loudly, "This fellow Taoist doesn't have any jade talismans on him. What Chong Feng said is false." Yes, this junior misunderstood. This junior misunderstood. Chong Feng smiled, bowed, and prepared to leave. "Wait." Xiao Hua interrupted Chong Feng's words and said to Guard Su, "Fellow Taoist Su, this message talisman was sent by this poor Taoist. This poor Taoist invited Jingbo City to uphold justice because Chong Feng slandered this poor Taoist for taking his jade talisman. Jinghua City has to give this poor Taoist an explanation, not Chong Feng. This guard Su was a little hesitant. The old man surnamed Yang frowned and asked unhappily, "Guard Su, is there such a thing?" Yes, this junior was summoned by this fellow Taoist communication talisman. However, Guard Su waved his hand and cast a silence talisman. Guard Su cupped his hands and said something to the old man, surnamed Yang. The old man's eyebrows jumped from time to time as he listened. Finally, the old man, surnamed Yang, waved his hand and removed the silence talisman. He shouted, "No matter who it is, as long as they violate the rules of Jinghua City, they must be dealt with according to City Lord Lu's decree." Yes, this junior understands. Guard Su cupped his hands and said, "Captain Yang." Chong Feng saw that the situation was bad and hurried forward. He bowed and said, "This is all this junior's fault. I was confused for a moment and thought that this fellow Taoist took this junior's jade talisman. That's why I went to reason with him. Since this fellow Taoist didn't take it, this junior will apologize to him." "Fellow Taoist Chong, this is unreasonable. There are so many people in your stall, but you just chased I and didn't ask about the others. If you didn't deliberately frame him, who would believe you?" Xiao Hua sneered. Chapter 1344. But they didn't have that jade talisman. Chong Feng was a little anxious. He argued and looked a little pleading. He smiled apologetically and said, "Fellow Taoist, if you don't like it, why don't you pick one of the jade talismans in my stall?" "No." Xiao Hua was abnormally straightforward. "Since you slandered Ai's reputation, then you should be prepared to fail. Then I would like to ask the senior of Jinghua City to uphold justice." With that, Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said respectfully to the old man, surnamed Yang, "I heard that Jinghua City's e-market has a rule of 10 times the penalty for one fake jade talisman. I wonder if I should also get back 10 times the compensation for being slandered?" The old man, surnamed Yang, glanced at Xiao Hua, then raised his head to look at the surrounding cultivators. He nodded and said, "My Jinghua City's e-market attracts people and is famous for its fairness. Fellow Taoist words are in line with my Jinghua City's rules. Fellow Taoist was slandered for taking a jade talisman. Then, this Chong Feng will take out 10 jade talismans to compensate fellow Taoist." "Ah, Senior Yang." Chong Feng saw the situation he was most afraid of and knew that begging Xiao Hua was useless. He hurriedly turned his head and said, Junior, this jade is a jade pendant, an ordinary jade pendant, definitely not a jade talisman." "Is that so?" The old man, surnamed Yang, didn't seem surprised and only snorted coldly. "He, Senior Yang, will uphold justice." Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Chong recommended a jade talisman to this poor Taoist and asked for 2 top-grade spirit stones." This was heard by all the fellow Taoists around. "If you don't believe me, you can ask the others." Without waiting for the old man, surnamed Yang, to speak, a few cultivators who were watching the show at the stall took a few steps forward and cupped their hands. "I can testify that I heard it with my own ears." Then Xiao Hua pointed at another cultivator who was dodging and said with a smile, "This fellow Taoist even took a fancy to this jade talisman and wanted to bid against I. Presumably, this jade talisman isn't fake, right?" That cultivator's face alternated between red and green. Then he clenched his teeth and cupped his hands. "I can also testify." When Chong Feng saw this, he was furious. However, when he moved his arm and saw the cultivator's fierce gaze, he didn't dare to say anything. After thinking, he still said to the old man, surnamed Yang, "I ask Senior Yang to be clear. With this junior's cultivation, how can I have a jade talisman?" Old man Yang shook his head, ignoring him. His face was cold and indifferent. Fellow Taoist Chong, what's the point? Can't prove what fellow Taoist says? T's prove it, TTS. Xiao snorted. However, if fellow Taoist Chong proves it's a jade pendant and not a jade talisman, then can I go to Jingbo City and accuse you of using a jade pendant as a jade talisman? You? Chong Feng was anxious. He jumped up and shouted, I already said it's a jade pendant, so I asked Senior Yang to show mercy. Use your divine sense to check this guy's body and see if there's any jade pendant. Also, is there I's jade pendant in this guy's storage pouch? Chong Feng, I and the other two have already used our divine sense to check this fellow Taoist body. Whether it's a jade pendant or a jade talisman, there's nothing. The cultivator surnamed Zhao behind him replied, displeased. Then it's definitely in his storage pouch. Chong Feng jumped up again, very assertive. Xiaohua didn't hesitate at all when he heard this. He shook the storage pouch, and everything inside fell out, scattering all over the ground. Chong Feng looked very carefully and was extremely disappointed. He shouted, Just this little thing? I don't believe it. Xiaohua obviously couldn't let him look at the storage pouch. He reached out and handed it to Guard Su. Guard Su waved his hand and didn't take it, saying, There's no need to look. This fellow Taoist storage pouch doesn't have anything like a jade pendant. What should I do? Chong Feng was very anxious. He had to pay 10 times the price. Not to mention 20 pieces of top-grade spirit stones. Even 10 pieces would take his life. Chong Feng's eyes turned rapidly. He pointed around and said, Someone must have taken that jade pendant. Chong Feng. The old man, surnamed Yang, released his pressure. Chong Feng felt like he was being pressed down by a huge boulder. With a plop, he knelt on the ground. Although Xiaohua wasn't the old man's main target, his knees still went soft, and he almost knelt down. No matter where that jade pendant of yours is, this fellow Taoist's accusation of blackmail is still valid. If you want to find your jade pendant, you can send a communication talisman to my Lake Jingling City. However, before that, you need to take out the compensation this fellow Taoist claims. I need to give this fellow Taoist and the surrounding Taoists an explanation. The old man, surnamed Yang, berated. But this junior doesn't have that many spirit stones. Chong Feng had obviously accepted his fate. He said with a bitter face and a trembling voice, And I saw the things in your stall and the storage pouch at your waist. I can barely gather enough. I just don't know if this fellow Taoist is satisfied. The old man, surnamed Yang, turned to look at Xiaohua. Xiaohua understood that the pressure just now didn't affect him for no reason. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, Senior is right. This junior is very satisfied with this explanation. We're all cultivators, and cultivation isn't easy. How could I force Lake Jingling City to cripple fellow Taoist Chang's cultivation? And the old man, surnamed Yang, nodded slightly. Thank you, fellow Taoist. When Chong Feng heard this, although his heart ached, he still hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. No need, fellow Taoist Chong. Just give the things in your stall and the storage pouch to I. Xiaohua said calmly. Yes, I'll go right away. Chong Feng's face was piled with a humble smile. He hurriedly withdrew and returned to his stall. He looked at this and that with a pitiful expression. In the end, he steeled his heart and put everything into his storage pouch. The old man, surnamed Yang, no longer paid attention to Xiaohua and the others. He said with a clear voice, Fellow Taoists, are you satisfied with my Lake Jingling City's punishment? Satisfied? The others all laughed. And, fellow Taoists, please rest assured, my Lake Jingling City will be the witness for all transactions in East City. With today's experience as a reference, if there's anything you need, feel free to send a communication talisman to my Lake Jingling City. My Lake Jingling City will definitely uphold justice for you. Thank you, Senior. Everyone cupped their hands and thanked him. The old man, surnamed Yang, and the other two waved their hands. A light curtain fell and covered the three of them. The three of them immediately flattened and disappeared with a twist. After the old man, surnamed Yang, left, Chong Feng handed the storage pouch to Xiaohua. His expression was different from before. There was a hint of threat in his eyes. He waved the storage pouch left and right and asked, Fellow Taoist, are you sure you want I's storage pouch? Of course, why not? Xiaohua's voice was calm as he extended his hand. Good. Chong Feng said the word good 3 times and handed the storage pouch to Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist, I don't need to tell you what's in your storage pouch. If you keep blabbering, be careful that I will use the communication talisman again and ask for the protection of Lake Jingling City. Xiaohua said as he turned to look at Guard Su and said, Guard Su, don't you think so? Guard Su looked at the surrounding people who had already left. He coughed and said in a low voice, Chong Feng, I know a lot about you. A while ago, you actually dared to provoke the disciples of Xuanyan School. If it wasn't for the fact that you didn't make a big deal out of it, even Captain Zhang wouldn't have been able to protect himself. If even I know, how can other people not know? You take care of yourself. That's all I have to say. He then cupped his hands at Xiaohua and said, Fellow Taoist, if you need anything, feel free to send me a communication talisman. With that, he disappeared from the light curtain, just like the old man, surnamed Yang. Ha ha ha. Xiaohua laughed loudly. He put the storage pouch into the maze armor and walked away. Xiaohua was wearing the 7 Skills Sex maze armor. Who knows how many of these maze armors there were in each city. Chongfeng's gaze followed Xiaohua for a while before it disappeared in a flash. Sigh. Chongfeng sighed. He knew that he wouldn't have a chance to get back at Xiaohua for what happened today. He could only hang his head dejectedly. At this time, the cultivator who was with Chongfeng looked around and saw that there was no one else around. He walked up and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Chong, don't worry. Nonsense, how can I not worry? All of I's things, including my storage pouch, are gone. Chongfeng said with an unhappy expression. But what could he do? The situation was like this at the time. That cultivator couldn't have done anything to resist. Fellow Taoist Chong. That cultivator walked a few steps forward and lowered his head to whisper a few words into Chongfeng's ear. Io, isn't that so? How could I? Chongfeng's expression became a bit more spirited. Xiaohua, who had walked very far away, kept an eye on his back as he walked. He nimbly took a few turns and followed a few more cultivators who were similarly cloaked. Only then did he arrive at a place where there were many cultivators. With a wave of his hand, he took out the jade pendant that Xiao Mao wanted from his space. After looking at it, the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Then, with a slight movement of his arm, the jade pendant disappeared. Evil people will naturally be punished with evil deeds. Chongfeng must have done a lot of these things. This young master only wanted to casually teach him a lesson. I didn't expect Jinghua City to be so fair. They actually gave all of Chongfeng's things to this young master. This is really straightforward. Thinking of this, Xiaohua couldn't even close his mouth. He rolled his eyes and took out Chongfeng's storage pouch. He threw everything inside into his space. With the empty storage pouch in his hand, he looked around. Is there even a need to say anything? Who knows what kind of tricks are inside this thing? I'll quickly deal with it and exchange it for spirit stones. Only then will I be safe. However, just as Xiaohua was looking around, he saw an extremely familiar figure not far away. Xiaohua unconsciously opened his mouth wide and thought in astonishment, why did this fellow Taoist appear here? Thinking of this, Xiaohua put away the storage pouch and quickly walked over. But just as he took a few steps, another person appeared next to that person. Xiaohua was even more surprised, and his footsteps came to an abrupt halt. Chapter 1345. After the purple color passed, the entire place stopped trembling. However, it was only quiet for a moment. All the colors just now appeared on that spot, and the entire place was filled with the 7 types of fluctuations. At that moment, that spot suddenly lit up. An array of white light flashed from there. In an instant, the white light filled the entire place, and the chaotic fluctuations in the place turned into an even more profound tremor at the same time. At this moment, everything in space within the light barrier entered this mysterious place. The space of thousands of feet, tens of thousands of feet, and even tens of thousands of feet once entered this mysterious place. It was like a clay ox entering the sea. Not a single trace of it could be seen. Everything in the space was the same as before. Except for a few flashing lights, everything else turned into the most basic particles. That tiny light spot suddenly collapsed, and then exploded, expanding infinitely in an instant. As for that heart-shaped object, when the light spot collapsed, it was sucked into the light spot, and a dozen other objects were also sucked into the surroundings. Following the explosion of the light spot, the heart-shaped object also exploded at the same time. However, the exploding object only expanded to tens of thousands of feet before it stopped. It formed a huge sphere that was tens of thousands of feet wide, wrapping the other objects inside. Bell, sword, axe, pagoda, guqin, cauldron, seal, mirror, pot, and stone formed a mysterious arrangement, floating at the edge of the big round ball. Outside the big round ball, it was still a mess, a chaos. Then a golden pearl the size of a duck egg exploded. The entire sphere was filled with sharp metal elemental energy. Then a green pearl exploded, wood elemental energy filled with vitality mixed with metal elemental energy. Then a blue pearl, a red pearl, and an earthen yellow pearl all exploded. Water elemental energy, fire elemental energy, and earth elemental energy all mixed together. Kacha, kacha. With a burst of thunder, the bead flashing with endless lightning finally burst open. Numerous lightning bolts struck the chi of the 5 elements. Woo-woo. The bead also burst open like a gust of wind. The chi of the 5 elements instantly filled the entire sphere. Following that, the chi of the 5 elements inside the sphere began to condense. Just as the 5-element chi condensed, the black-white fruit that was far away at the edge of the sphere quickly entered the center of the sphere and slowly rotated. The black-white fruit actually slowly melted in the chaotic 5-element chi, turning into a thin layer of black and white. The thin layer gradually expanded and divided the entire sphere into 2 halves. Finally, the black and white film became transparent and disappeared. The 2 black and white pearls that were together with the black-white fruit also separated at this time. One exploded on the white film layer, and the other exploded on the black film layer. The 2 halves of the sphere were filled with 2 different kinds of black and white brilliance. The lotus platform, bamboo, saplings, black flags, and other things that were originally flying and tangled together in the sphere immediately flew into 2 groups with the appearance of the black and white brilliance. The lotus platform, beads, saplings, and other things slowly gathered on one side of the white brilliance and gradually settled down. The black flags and other things flew to the other side of the black brilliance and slowly calmed down. As the 5-element chi condensed, the turbid air gradually descended and covered the lotus platform, beads, and other things at the bottom layer, gradually forming solid soil. The clear air gradually floated up, forming the lingering clouds above the soil. Roar. The dragon's soul seemed to be very surprised and flew above the sphere, occupying one side of the white brilliance. God the Phoenix's soul was also very happy and flew above the sphere, occupying the other side of the black brilliance. A space was formed above the soil, and it was about 100 feet in size above the space. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, earth, fire, and wind slowly evolved. Below the space, the black brilliance underwent a mysterious change. Outside the sphere, which was tens of thousands of feet in size, was chaos. As for the spot of light that had exploded earlier, it suddenly appeared again. It flashed with a mysterious ripple and continued to move forward. However, it was unknown whether the area in front of it was the mysterious space or if it was beyond the mysterious space. The changes of earth, fire, wind, and wind occurred in the mysterious space, and the absolute space where the light shield was also changed accordingly. The moment the mysterious space was formed, the space around the light shield rippled, and a pitch-black hole appeared, swallowing the light shield. The light shield was actually forcefully pushed out by the absolute space. At this time, the light shield was extremely dim, and the light shield was pushed into an extremely unstable space by the absolute space. Several spatial cracks appeared, and the light shield was cut into pieces. The light shield shrank and retracted into Zhang Xiaohua's left arm. It was a ring-shaped ring that was wrapped around his left arm. At this time, the ring only had a dim brilliance, and it was not enough to protect Zhang Xiaohua's entire body. The ring shook slightly and separated from Zhang Xiaohua's arm and rapidly flew toward his head. The brilliance flashed again and penetrated the skull, deeply penetrating into the brain, and protected Zhang Xiaohua's brain. The brain was the most important part. As long as it could protect the soul, memories, and other things, even if Zhang Xiaohua's body was damaged, there would still be a chance for him to make a comeback. Zhang Xiaohua had encountered such a situation in the Yaoshan Immortal Abode's Immortal Guardian Spirit tablet. However, Zhang Xiaohua's memories were now protected by the brilliance of the ring. If he did not have the opportunity, or if he did not understand the mysteries of the ring, or if his cultivation did not reach an extremely high level, these memories would not be easily revealed. The light shield had just dissipated when another spatial crack appeared from afar and rapidly struck toward Zhang Xiaohua's body. At this critical moment, the space beside Zhang Xiaohua surged, as if there was a violent tremor behind the space. A hole about 10 feet wide suddenly appeared, and a powerful suction force sucked his body in. The little black dog and the little yellow mink beside him were also sucked in, but from different places. At the same time, the sword embryo in Zhang Xiaohua's hand, which had loosened slightly, was also completely released at this time. Just as Zhang Xiaohua's body flew to the edge of the hole, a golden brilliance also flew toward the void with a whoosh and pierced into the man's body. Upon closer inspection, that brilliance was actually a snake-shaped ring. The snake-shaped shape was very fast and was about to penetrate the man's body, but the golden threads in the man's blood vessels entangled it slightly, and the snake-shaped shape stayed in the man's body, fusing with his flesh and blood. After Zhang Xiaohua's body disappeared, the hole gradually shrank, but the spatial crack that came from afar coincidentally struck the hole and stopped it from shrinking. In the unstable void, countless mysterious things were sucked into the hole bit by bit. Behind this hole, where was it? Where did Zhang Xiaohua go? Chapter 1346. Fellow Taoist, have you thought of this? Who is the fellow Taoist that Xiaohua saw? That's right, it's the female cultivator Kai Zhuoxia that Xiaohua saw on his way to the 100 Herbs Sex Yao Nong Peak. Next to Kai Zhuoxia is the euphorious sex Li Zongbao, the young cultivator that Xiao Yuehong called a cultivation genius. These two, how did they get together? Xiaohua stopped and watched them quietly. Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuoxia were both dressed in ordinary clothes. Li Zongbao's demeanor was like jade, his every movement calm and composed. An oppressive aura emanated from him, making others feel ashamed of their own inferiority. Kai Zhuoxia's slightly tanned face was filled with joy. Joy filled the corners of her eyes, eyebrows, and the corners of her mouth. Her eyes revealed a strange expression, as if she wanted to entangle Li Zongbao. Kai Zhuoxia's gaze didn't even leave Li Zongbao's side for a moment. Xiaohua originally wanted to go up and greet Kai Zhuoxia, but seeing this scene, how could he go up? Li Zongbao was clearly unfamiliar with Jingbei City's e-market. Kai Zhuoxia walked by his side, pointing at something from time to time and saying something. Li Zongbao smiled and nodded repeatedly. Xiaohua thought for a moment, then quietly followed the two not far away to see what they were doing. The two of them went to a few stalls. Li Zongbao was very generous and bought a lot of things. These things were placed in a Kai Zhuoxia's storage pouch from time to time. Kai Zhuoxia did not show any signs of refusing. She felt that it was only natural. Interesting. The corner of Xiaohua's mouth that was hidden under the bewilderment revealed a slight smile. However, at this moment, Li Zongbao stopped and naturally turned his head to look at Xiaohua, who was following him. Upon seeing this, Xiaohua's footsteps paused for a moment, but he didn't stop in the slightest. He walked forward a few steps and looked around. His eyes unconsciously lit up as he stopped at a stall. As a result, Xiaohua turned around again. In front of him was a rather large stall. The stall owner was an 11th layer aura refining cultivator, and the things on display in his stall were some storage bags. Seeing Xiao Hua approach, the cultivator smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, welcome to my 7 Skills Sect stall. What do you need?" 7 Skills Sect? Xiao Hua stared blankly. The 7 Skills Sect was one of the 3 great cultivation sects in the country of Shi. How could they have such a small stall? Fellow Taoist, this bewildering insect was refined by my 7 Possibilities sect. Could it be that you've never visited my 7 Possibilities sect stall before? The cultivator smiled. This Mimi was purchased by my sect's master from a shop in the northern part of the city. It wasn't purchased on the market. Xiao Hua smiled and regained his calm. He said, "I have been to East City many times, but I have never visited Chi Xiao sect stall." "Oh, fellow Taoist, my 7 Possibilities sect has many stalls in the market. This is only one of them. My 7 Possibilities sect's items are quite expensive, so it is natural for fellow Taoists to come here less often." The cultivator smiled and said, "May I ask why fellow Taoist is here this time?" "Ha! There's nothing else." Xiao Hua said as he took out the storage pouch and said, "This storage pouch I no longer has any use. Let's see if the 7 Possibilities sect can buy it back." "Of course." The cultivator nodded and took the storage pouch. He looked at it and said, "Fellow Taoist, this storage pouch is not bad. It has a lot of space and hasn't been used many times. If fellow Taoist is willing to part with it, then I will pay you 2 top-quality spirit stones. What do you think?" 2 top-quality spirit stones? Xiao Hua was a little surprised and opened his mouth, not knowing what to ask. After all, in his impression, a storage bag was worth 10 high-grade spirit stones. He never thought that this storage bag would be worth 2 top-grade spirit stones. Previously, when he heard the old man surnamed Yang say this, he thought that the old man was just trying to smooth things over. Seeing Xiao Hua's hesitation, the cultivator smiled and said, "Is fellow Taoist in pain? How about you take it back?" Fellow Taoist must have spent at least 5 top-quality spirit stones to buy this storage pouch from my 7 Possibilities sect. You haven't even used it much yet, and you want to sell it? Don't you think it's a good deal? A storage pouch made by the 7 Possibilities sect? Xiao Hua understood. It seemed that storage pouches made by different sects had different prices. Moreover, according to the size of the pouch, the number of times it was used, or the number of years it was used. The 10 top-quality spirit stones that fellow Taoist buy from the Fujian sect said should be the lowest quality storage pouch. As for the one on Xiao Hua's waist, well, it was probably going to be scrapped soon. Xiao Hua's heart ached when he heard this. That was 3 top-quality spirit stones. However, after thinking about it again, he had no use for this storage pouch. Moreover, it had hidden dangers. If he could exchange it for 2 spirit stones, then it was 2 spirit stones. He nodded and said, "Forget it, fellow Taoist. Let's sell it." Okay. The 7 Possibilities sect cultivator had been waiting for him to say that. He accepted the storage pouch and took out 2 spirit stones of different colors from his own storage pouch. One was a blue crystal like water, while the other was a bright red flame. Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He understood why the 2 spirit stones were different in color. He calmly took them and hesitated for a moment before handing over the blue spirit stone. He asked, "Fellow Taoist, can I exchange it for a fire-type spirit stone?" "Of course." The cultivator smiled and said, "I have a lot of fire-type spirit stones here, but I don't have many water-type spirit stones. If fellow Taoist needs a fire-type spirit stone, it's best." Then, he handed over a bright red spirit stone to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua thanked him and put it away in his storage pouch. When he looked back, Kai Zhuixia and Li Zongbao were long gone. Xiao Hua was just casually looking around. Seeing that he couldn't find them, he stopped looking. He bid farewell to the 7 Possibilities sect cultivator and prepared to walk further in to see if there was anything he needed. The market was indeed huge. There were many places that were usually empty, but now there were many stalls. Soon, for hours had passed. Xiao Hua had seen many strange things, but he didn't buy them. Moreover, Under the influence of what he saw, Xiao Hua gradually learned about the cultivation situation in the state of Shi. Among the three great cultivation sects, the Seven Possibilities sect was good at refining tools. Things like bewildering beads and storage pouches were all from Seven Possibilities sect. Xuanyan School was good at refining pills. Foundation Establishment pills and marrow cleansing pills were all from Xuanyan School. Of course, there were many other schools that were good at refining pills. For example, 10,000 Flower Valley Black Pill School and 100 Herb School could be counted as one of them, but they were very small. As for Shanghua School, they mainly refined talismans. Many of the best quality yellow talismans and even spirit talismans were refined by Shanghua School. Huangdao School and Five Elements School could also refine yellow talismans, but like 100 Herb School, they were small in scale. There were also many other small details that Xiao Hua secretly remembered in his heart. Before the sky turned dark, Xiao Hua once again purchased a marrow cleansing pill from the Xuanyan cult stall. He had previously purchased pills, but they were all used for healing. Pills that replenished qi, such as marrow cleansing pill and peiyuan pill, which could increase one's power, he had never bought them before. Of course, these kinds of pills rarely appeared in the market. Xiao Hua's marrow cleansing pill was obtained after a bidding war. It actually cost Xiao Hua 10 mid-grade spirit stones. Thinking about how many spirit herbs he had to use to exchange for these 10 mid-grade spirit stones, Xiao Hua's heart faintly dripped blood. However, he had no choice but to buy it, because he needed to test whether or not this marrow cleansing pill was the same as Xiao Yuehong's peiyuan pill, which could increase his cultivation by a year. The market closed when the sky turned dark. Xiao Hua saw many cultivators walking out of the market, so he followed them out. As he walked, he also paid attention to his surroundings to see if there were any eyesores. Fortunately, he was overthinking. There were many people in the crowd who concealed their cultivation and appearance, so he didn't appear to be out of place at all. After he walked out of the market, he carefully walked far away, but he didn't see anyone following behind him. Xiao Hua found a secluded place and took off his camouflage mask, revealing his true appearance. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. He didn't believe that he could arouse the suspicions of Chong Feng and the others with his qi refining second-layer cultivation. Then he found a nearby inn, paid the spirit stones, and entered the room under the guidance of the inn's waiter. After activating the restriction in the room, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and sat cross-legged. He sat quietly for nearly half an hour before opening his eyes. He patted his storage pouch and took out the marrow cleansing pill. First, he sniffed the pill's rich medicinal fragrance. Then, without hesitation, he threw it into his mouth. After the marrow cleansing pill melted and flowed into his body, Xiao Hua silently used the death catharsis art to refine the medicinal efficacy of the marrow cleansing pill. Very quickly, 2 hours passed, then another 4 hours. When Xiao Hua opened his eyes, his face revealed a thoughtful expression. 3 hours had already passed. AI, is this marrow cleansing pill's medicinal efficacy inferior to the peiyuan pill? Or is this ordinary marrow cleansing pill unable to greatly increase Ai's cultivation? After inspecting his cultivation, Xiao Hua muttered to himself with a bitter smile. This marrow cleansing pill, which cost him 10 mid-grade spirit stones, was far inferior to the peiyuan pill he took at Yellow Flower Ridge. It was roughly equivalent to a month's worth of cultivation. Although the marrow cleansing pill's medicinal efficacy is inferior to the peiyuan pills, it shouldn't be inferior by this much, right? Perhaps. Only if I refine the cleansing marrow pill again will I be able to find out the peculiarity. Xiao Hua inwardly muttered to himself. He took out the 2 top-grade fire attribute spirit stones from his space and happily looked at them. He also thought to himself, I've heard that these top-grade spirit stones can be used for cultivation. If I'm not mistaken, then the spirit stone's spiritual energy should be absorbed into the body, similar to the principle of taking a pill. But, in the end, how can it be absorbed into the body? I still need to find a way to use the spirit stones. Immediately, Xiao Hua stored the spirit stones into his space, closed his eyes, and began to cultivate. He immersed his mind into the space, comprehending the changes in the heavens and silently circulating his cultivation method. As usual, the starlight in the outer realm wrapped around Xiao Hua. The next day, Xiao Hua did not go to the first gathering after his city. Instead, he took out the talisman paper and talisman ink for refining the yellow talisman, preparing to refine the ice thorn talisman. Chapter 1347. The icicle talisman was the same as the fireball talisman. They were both low-level yellow talismans, but their attributes were different. Xiao Hua was eager to refine the icicle talisman because he wanted to confirm his conjecture. Because it was his first time refining the icicle talisman, it was somewhat difficult. After trying several times, he barely succeeded. The difficult part wasn't the drawing of the talisman, nor was it the insertion of the incantation. It was just that when he urged his magic power to wrap the world's spiritual energy with the talisman ink, it was much more difficult than refining the fireball talisman. Xiao Hua didn't use a talisman brush to refine the icicle talisman, but when he rested for a moment and took out a talisman brush from his storage pouch to refine the icicle talisman, the difference was even more obvious. He drew a low-level icicle talisman over 100 times, but he didn't succeed even once. In the beginning, when he used his magic power to urge the talisman brush, it was very difficult for the talisman ink to wrap the world's spiritual energy. Later on, before he could finish drawing the talisman, the world's spiritual energy would break through the talisman ink and dissipate in the air. Xiao Hua's self-confidence was greatly damaged. After failing dozens of times, he could only change the talisman and refine a few high-grade fireball talismans or middle-grade confinement talismans to comfort himself. This kind of slow practice, when it became boring, he would comprehend the heavenly Tao and cultivate his mental cultivation method. When his mind was clear, he would practice again. Time passed extremely quickly. After an unknown amount of time, when Xiao Hua used up all the low-grade talisman papers he bought from his city, the refining of the icicle talisman broke through to the final stage and was stuck at the stage of writing the talisman. Putting down the talisman brush, Xiao Hua moved his slightly sore and numb wrist. Looking at the somewhat messy room, he smiled bitterly and thought, "It seems that the 5 elements of the physique are also related to the refining of yellow talismans. I myself have a fire attribute physique. Using my own method to refine fireball talismans, I can easily refine fireball talismans that surpass high-grade ones. Even if I use a talisman brush to refine them, I can barely refine them to mid-grade ones. But if I were to change it to a water attribute yellow talisman, which is incompatible with the 5 elements, even if I were to use a talisman brush to refine them, I can only refine them to mid-grade ones. And if I were to use a talisman brush, it would be even more difficult. How many days have I spent using thousands of talisman papers? I actually still haven't succeeded." Alas, no wonder Senior Ma said that this is a process of accumulation of experience. Xiao Hua had long agreed with Ma Qingqing's point of view in his heart. Also how long has it been? Presumably, Heaven Qi has already forgotten about me. Think of a way yourself. Xiao Hua immediately left the house and went straight to E-Bazaar. Although E-Bazaar was the same as usual, Xiao Hua, who had seen E-Bazaar before, felt that it was absolutely desolate. After walking around for a while, he bought some talisman paper and talisman ink. Xiao Hua then left E-Bazaar. Just as his figure appeared at the entrance of E-Bazaar, a scarlet-red brilliance quickly flew in front of him and quietly floated in the air. Xiao Hua stared blankly for a moment before coming to his senses. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. He stretched out his hand and took the light. A familiar voice rang out. It was Ma Qingqing's message. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I made you wait for so long. If you have time today, quickly come to Huayan Park. I, Tianqi, have an absolutely great opportunity. I want to see how fellow Taoist fate is. An absolutely great opportunity." Xiao Hua's face lit up with joy. "Could it be that you have some cultivation method to give me?" Xiao Hua excitedly walked a few steps, then unconsciously slowed down. He slowly pondered in his heart. If he wanted to join Heaven Chi, then he had to reveal his talisman crafting technique. This was the key for Xiao Hua to join Heaven Chi. However, although Xiao Hua could refine low-grade fireball talismans and high-grade ones at that, he could even refine high-grade confinement talismans. However, his technique was different from the technique used to refine yellow talismans in Dawn Rain Continent. He didn't use a talisman brush to refine them. What gave Xiao Hua the most headache was that his cultivation was only at the second layer of qi refining. With such a low cultivation, it was absolutely impossible for him to refine high-grade fireball talismans. Even if he used a talisman brush to refine a mid-grade fireball talisman, it was inevitable that he would reveal himself in Heaven Chi. And the direct consequence of revealing himself was that he might be noticed by 100 Herbs Gate. Heaven Chi was a self-help organization for rogue cultivators. It didn't have the obligation to protect every single rogue cultivator. If 100 Herbs Gate found out, Heaven Chi definitely wouldn't stand up for Xiao Hua. After all, Heaven Chi didn't even forbid its own members from fighting. This is a rather troublesome matter. Xiao Hua stroked his chin in a daze. He was indeed in a dilemma. After walking a few steps, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He smiled and said, "How can I be so dumb now? First, I'll use a talisman paper to refine an icicle talisman. Although this icicle talisman hasn't been successfully refined, it's not too far away. If Heaven Chi really doesn't approve, then I'll take the risk and refine a fireball talisman with a talisman brush. In any case, I'll just have to be extra careful in the future." After making up his mind, Xiao Hua quickened his pace. By the time he arrived at the Huayan Park, it was already afternoon. Seeing rogue cultivators entering and exiting the Huayan Park from time to time, Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. The last time he came here, wasn't this lively, right? After entering Huayan Park, there were indeed many rogue cultivators inside. They seemed to be busy with something. When they saw Xiao Hua enter, they ignored him. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's original misgivings disappeared without a trace. Thinking about it, Zhang Zhihao attacking a rogue cultivator in the second layer of qi refining wasn't something to be proud of. Moreover, this bastard definitely had the mentality of hogging it all for himself. He definitely wouldn't let others know. Xiao Hua's heart was at ease, and his brows also relaxed. According to his previous memory, he arrived in front of the room from last time. Just as Xiao Hua was about to step in, a middle-aged rogue cultivator coincidentally came out from inside. He looked at Xiao Hua with astonishment and asked, "Fellow Taoist, I'm not familiar with you. Are you a new fellow Taoist?" Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "I haven't joined Heaven Chi yet. This time, I'm looking for fellow Taoist Ma Qingsheng." "Oh, so you're looking for fellow Taoist Ma." The rogue cultivator suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Ma isn't here, what? Not in Jingbo City? But fellow Taoist Ma sent a summoning talisman just now." Xiao Hua stared blankly. "This?" The rogue cultivator smiled bitterly. "Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. I only said that fellow Taoist Ma isn't in this room. I didn't say he wasn't in Huayan Park or Jingbo City, right?" Hearing this, Xiao Hua's face became embarrassed. He smiled apologetically and said, "I was impatient and misunderstood fellow Taoist." "Haha, it's fine, it's fine." The rogue cultivator smiled and said, "Huayan Park is relatively busy today. If fellow Taoist has a summoning talisman, there's no harm in sending one. Otherwise, it really won't be easy to find fellow Taoist Ma." "Of course, I forgot about this." Xiao Hua slapped his head and came to a realization. Afterwards, after expressing his thanks, he took out a summoning talisman from his storage pouch. After sending the summoning talisman, Xiao Hua waited for a long while before he saw Ma Qingsheng hurrying over. Ma Qingsheng had a smile on his face from far away. When he came closer, he cupped his hands and said, "I've troubled fellow Taoist Xiao to wait for so long. I don't dare." Xiao Hua hurriedly returned the greeting and said with a smile, "Seeing so many people in Huayan Park, I know how busy fellow Taoist Ma is. Did something happen in Heaven Forsaken?" He. Naturally, there's an absolute opportunity. Otherwise, why would I be in such a hurry to have you come over? Ma Qingchang said with a smile. And? So, it's not a cultivation method. Xiao Hua was somewhat surprised and asked curiously, I wonder what fellow Taoist Ma is talking about? Ha ha ha. This is a major matter in Heaven Forsaken. Fellow Taoist, Xiao, still hasn't joined my Heaven Forsaken, so forgive me for not being able to give you a detailed explanation. Ma Qingchang said very happily, That's right, fellow Taoist Xiao, that fireball talisman, has it been successfully refined? Not yet, Xiao Hua said without hesitation. I failed to refine the fireball talisman. Later, I found a book on refining the icicle talisman and had some insights. Although I haven't been able to completely refine it, I'm not far from it. I wonder. As Xiao Hua said this, he carefully observed Ma Qingqing's expression. Unexpectedly, Ma Qingqing's expression was as calm as water. He simply didn't care about what Xiao Hua said. After Xiao Hua finished speaking, he clapped his hands and said, That's very good. I already told fellow Taoist Xiao that although refining talismans depends on one's aptitude, if you don't have the guidance of a wise master, it's definitely not an easy task. For fellow Taoist Xiao to be able to cultivate to this extent in such a short period of time is already very commendable. As he said this, he clapped his hands and took out a summoning talisman. With a push of his transcendence energy, the summoning talisman flew away. He turned his head and said to Xiao Hua, Fellow Taoist, Xiao has always been very busy. I also haven't been able to see him for several days. If you don't use the summoning talisman, it's really hard to find him. Xiao Hua smiled and nodded. Ma Qingqing seemed to have a very good impression of Xiao Hua. He looked Xiao Hua up and down and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Xiao, during this period of time, I've been very worried about you. I was afraid that with only one mid-grade spirit stone, you wouldn't be able to survive in Jingbo City. But seeing that fellow Taoist didn't come to Huayin Yuan or send a message, and, to tell the truth, the longer the test dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for fellow Taoist. Therefore, I didn't urge fellow Taoist Xiao too much. But now it seems that fellow Taoist Xiao is also mingling very well in this Jingbo City. You even got a storage pouch. Ha! Xiao Hua smiled and untied the storage pouch. Fellow Taoist Ma will naturally know when you take a look. What? Ma Qingchang took it and casually looked inside. There was a somewhat strange expression on his face. He handed it over again and said, Although this is a storage pouch with an extremely small space, it's still a storage pouch after all. Fellow Taoist Zhao's ability can be considered to be at a glance. I wouldn't dare. I was only slightly fiddling with some things in Yizhong. If I didn't have a storage pouch, it would really be inconvenient. Xiao Hua already had a countermeasure and explained with a smile. Haha, there's no need to say anything. This is fellow Taoist Zhao's own matter. I, Tianqi, have never been interested in it. Haha. Ma Qingcheng stopped Xiao Hua's explanation. Just as he was about to speak, a voice came from outside the door. Fellow Taoist Ma, why are you so happy? Hearing this, Xiao Hua hurriedly got up and took a few steps forward. He cupped his hands and said, Junior greets Senior Qing. The person who came was Qing Fengmin. He was also happy to see Xiao Hua and returned the greeting. Long time no see. Fellow Taoist Xiao, how's your yellow talisman refining coming along? Chapter 1348. Hearing Qing Fengmin's concern, Xiao Hua's heart warmed. He smiled and said, Although it's not as good as Senior Qing, it's not too far away. Immediately, Xiao Hua patted his storage pouch and took out the Fireball Talisman refining booklet and a mid-grade spirit stone. He very respectfully handed them to Qing Fengmin. Why? Qing Fengmin was somewhat surprised. He pointed at the booklet and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao hasn't finished refining yet, right? Why are you returning the booklet to I? Haha, fellow Taoist Qing, fellow Taoist Xiao hasn't made any progress with the Fireball Talisman, but he has some experience with the Icicle Talisman. Ma Qingchang said with a smile, I really admire fellow Taoist Qing's insight. Is that so? Qing Fomin was even more surprised and looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua smiled and told Ma Qingsheng what he just said. Oh, so it's like that. Qing Fomin nodded slightly. It seems fellow Taoist Xiao has a water physique. That's why he couldn't refine the fireball talisman. This is I's negligence. Ma Qingsheng said with a smile. This can't be blamed on fellow Taoist Qing. According to Jiang Jianbai, this talisman refining method doesn't have much to do with the five elements physique. Who knew that fellow Taoist Zhao's water physique would conflict with the fireball talisman? I guess it's related to the spiritual energy of heaven and earth at the beginning of refining talismans. Qing Fomin looked at the booklet in Xiaohua's hand. Moreover, this fireball talisman booklet is the only one in I's possession. Even if I know fellow Taoist Xiao has a water physique, I still have to give this fireball talisman booklet to fellow Taoist Xiao. Hearing this, Xiaohua pushed forward the things in his hand and said, "Many thanks for fellow Taoist Qing's good intentions. This fireball talisman booklet and these spirit stones, I said that day that they were only temporarily borrowed by I. Today, I specially brought them here. I ask fellow Taoist Qing to take them back." Qing Fomin looked at Xiaohua, as well as the storage pouch on Xiaohua's waist. He blinked a few times and said, "How about this? This poor Taoist will accept these mid-grade spirit stones first. Fellow Taoist Xiao should keep the fireball talisman booklet. It won't be too late to return it to this poor Taoist when you've successfully refined the fireball talisman." Xiaohua nodded and took back the booklet. Qing Fomin took the spirit stones and put them into his storage pouch. Then he took out a sound-transmitting talisman and said a few words on it. Then he sent out the sound-transmitting talisman and turned to Xiaohua and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait a moment. This poor Taoist has already called 3 talisman craftsmen of my heaven forsaken. Let them see fellow Taoist law enforcement methods. I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Qing." Xiaohua cupped his hands and thanked him. "It's okay. Fellow Taoist Ma must have told you. First, I have the same idea as fellow Taoist Ma. If fellow Taoist can successfully refine the fireball talisman, then you can definitely join Heaven Forsaken. I only need one talisman refining talisman master to watch the entire refining process. Second, I have some worldly affairs to attend to during this time, so I didn't urge fellow Taoist Ma." Qing Fomin pondered for a moment, then said, "But this time there's a great opportunity. For fellow Taoists of Heaven Forsaken, it's excellent. I thought fellow Taoist Xiao should also need it, so I asked fellow Taoist Ma to send a message to fellow Taoist Xiao." Xiaohua smiled, cupped his hands, and thanked again. "Fellow Taoist Qing is so righteous. I am really touched." It's okay. She country's individual cultivators are one family." Qing Fomin modestly waved his hand, then asked about Xiaohua's life in Jinghua City during this time. Xiaohua carefully answered, but Qing Fomin also asked casually. He didn't inquire about any details or privacy, which made Xiaohua worry for nothing. Not long after, 3/4 layer Qi refining individual cultivators arrived. Their Taoist robes were very bright, and their faces were full of arrogance that was rarely seen among individual cultivators. After the 3 of them greeted Qing Fomin and Ma Qingsheng, the first cultivator, who was about 30 years old, was very tall and had a fierce-looking face, glanced at Xiaohua and asked curiously, "This fellow Taoist seems to be a bit unfamiliar." "Hee, fellow Taoist Zhou. Don't worry, I will introduce you." Qing Fomin pulled Xiaohua's sleeve and said, "This is fellow Taoist Xiaohua, a loose cultivator preparing to join Heaven Forsaken." Then he pointed at fellow Taoist Zhou and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, this is fellow Taoist Zhou Xingheng, a talisman master of Heaven Forsaken." Qing Fomin's finger didn't stop. Then he pointed at a thin cultivator with a sallow face and an even colder expression and said, "This is fellow Taoist Li Xiaowen." Finally, there was a tanned cultivator with sunken cheeks and extremely small eyes, named Chengyu. "Greetings to the 3 seniors." Xiaohua respectfully bowed. The 3 nodded slightly, except for Li Xiaowen, who cupped his hands and returned the greeting. The others casually waved their hands, which could be considered a greeting. Seeing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel slightly embarrassed. "Oh, fellow Taoists, I invited the three of you here to ask you to help me examine whether fellow Taoist Zhao's talisman crafting is qualified to join Heaven Forsaken." Qing Fengmin seemed to have seen a lot, so he didn't think much of it. Fellow Taoist Xiao is a talisman master? Li Xiaowen's face was very surprised. How is that possible? Cheng Yu with small eyes said coldly, "How can a second-layer qi refining individual cultivator be a talisman master?" Zhou Tsengheng also said with a smile, "If he really is a talisman master, why do the three of us need to come here?" Exactly. Although fellow Taoist Xiao has some talent in talisman crafting, but he still can't completely refine yellow talismans. So I invited the three of you here to see how fellow Taoist Xiao's talisman crafting level is. Qing Fengmin said with a smile. "Oh, so it's like that." The three of them glanced at each other. Then Li Xiaowen said, "Then, would fellow Taoist Xiao please display his talent? Seniors, please don't laugh at me. This junior's just a beginner. Please don't laugh at me." Xiaohua was very humble. He took out the talisman paper, talisman ink, and talisman brush, and placed them on the ground. Seeing that Xiaohua only had low-grade talisman crafting materials, the corners of the three people's mouths slightly drooped. Soon after, Xiaohua refined the icicle talisman as usual. Of course, this time was the same as usual. At the final critical moment, the talisman ink couldn't wrap around the spiritual energy, and the entire successful yellow talisman turned into ashes with a qi sound. Xiaohua's expression didn't change. He put away everything properly, then stood quietly to the side, waiting for the three people's judgment. Fellow Taoists? How about we take a look at fellow Taoist Zhao's level of talisman crafting? Qing Fengmin's gaze followed the icicle talisman turning into ashes, and a somewhat strange expression appeared on his face. Soon after, that expression disappeared, and he raised his head to ask the three people with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, this talisman's memory is very deep. There wasn't the slightest bit of hesitation when waving the talisman brush. Presumably, you have some talent in the crafting of yellow talismans." Cheng Yu frowned and said, "But fellow Taoist Zhao's icicle talisman's talisman characters are of different thickness and extremely uneven. This shows that fellow Taoist Zhao's control of magic power is really lacking. And this control of magic power is the key to crafting yellow talismans. The icicle talisman is only a low-grade yellow talisman, and it doesn't have the talisman writing technique of mid-grade and high-grade yellow talismans. That talisman writing technique requires one to have meticulous control of magic power. It can be said that fellow Taoist Zhao's shortcomings have already blocked fellow Taoist Zhao's path of advancement in the field of yellow talismans." "And I understand." Qing Fengmin nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhao's shortcoming is that his cultivation isn't high enough, and his control of magic power is very insufficient. This can only be achieved through hard work." Li Xiaowen said, "Fellow Taoist Qing is right. I observed fellow Taoist Zhao's talisman characters. Although his technique is rusty, the talisman characters drawn are very spiritual, and the position of the brush strokes is extremely accurate. If it's only the aptitude for crafting yellow talismans, fellow Taoist Xiao is really good. Unfortunately, his age isn't too suitable. What about fellow Taoist Zhou?" Qing Fengmin turned to look at Zhou Tsengheng. "To tell the truth, when I started crafting yellow talismans, my cultivation was higher than fellow Taoist Zhao's, and my age was also much younger." Zhou Tsengheng pondered for a moment and said, "Moreover, I spent a full half-year of hard work to successfully craft the Fireball Talisman. Fellow Taoist Xiao, being able to craft to such a degree is also commendable." "I understand." Qing Fengmin nodded, looked at the three people, and asked, "Then, in the eyes of three fellow Taoists, can fellow Taoist Xiao join Heaven Forsaken as a talisman master?" "He can't," Cheng Yu said resolutely and decisively. "Even if fellow Taoist Xiao can craft icicle talismans in the future, It'll only be low-level yellow talismans. His level can only be like this. Naturally, he can't join as a talisman master. Oh no, I overreached myself. Xiao Hua was somewhat anxious in his heart, and said inwardly, "This kind of petty trick? I have to pay more attention in the future. I mustn't make any more mistakes." Then, he secretly pondered about how to remedy the situation. "I think it's okay," Li Xiaowen said. "Didn't fellow Taoist Qing only ask about fellow Taoist Zhao's aptitude? Just looking at talisman crafting methods, and not looking at fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation, I feel that he can barely be considered a talisman master. I have the same view as fellow Taoist Li." Zhou Tsengheng's words made Xiao Hua's heart settle down. Actually, if fellow Taoist Xiao practices for a year and a half, he can definitely craft this icicle talisman successfully. At that time, joining Heaven Forsaken will naturally be easy. Haha, that's exactly so. Ma Qingsheng also clapped to the side and said, "I have a compromise. Fellow Taoist Xiao can join Heaven Forsaken as a talisman master today. However, because he hasn't been able to craft yellow talismans and hasn't provided yellow talismans to Heaven Forsaken, before he can craft the icicle talisman, he can't obtain the cultivation technique provided by fellow Taoist Tian Forsaken. Fellow Taoist Qing, fellow Taoists, what do you think? That's how it should be." Qing Fengmin was also happy when he heard this. He nodded and said, "It's not easy to become a talisman master. Although fellow Taoist Zhao's accomplishments in talisman crafting will be limited in the future, after all, he can still contribute to Heaven Forsaken. Heaven Forsaken, welcomed such a cultivator." Xiao Hua was overjoyed and hurriedly cupped his hands in thanks. "Fellow Taoists, thank you for your help. Good. We welcome fellow Taoist Xiao to join Heaven Forsaken." Qing Fengmin clapped and said, "Fellow Taoist Ma, please bring fellow Taoist Xiao to register." The three fellow Taoists will also go together and record the situation here. From today onwards, fellow Taoist Xiao is a member of Heaven Forsaken. Chapter 1349. Registration was a necessary part of joining Heaven Forsaken, just like when Zhang Zhihao brought Han Fei and Qiao Fengyue along. However, Xiao Hua was joining as a talisman master, so he needed Cheng Yu, Li Xiaowen, and Zhou Tsengheng as witnesses. Only after the three of them left behind oral statements and traces of magic power would Xiao Hua be officially considered a rogue cultivator. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Xiao. Zhou Tsengheng and Cheng Yu didn't stay any longer. They nodded slightly and left. Only Li Xiaowen cupped his hands with a smile and said to Xiao Hua, "Fellow Taoist Xiao has become a member of Heaven Forsaken. In the future, you and I will support each other under the banner of Heaven Forsaken." Xiao Hua was happy and replied, "Fellow Taoist Li is a senior. Whether it is cultivation or talisman crafting, this junior can't compare to you. In the future, I will need Senior Li's help." Well said, well said. Let's discuss and improve together." Li Xiaowen cupped his hands and left. Xiao Hua followed Ma Qingcheng back to the house. Ma Qingcheng asked, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, now that you are a member of Heaven Forsaken, I won't hide it from you. In the next 2 days, Heaven Forsaken will have a big event. Fellow Taoist is qualified to participate." "Big event?" Xiao Hua was stunned and suddenly realized, Ink Haze Black Forest. Ink Haze Black Forest? Just like Xiao Hua, Ma Qingsheng was slightly stunned, then he shook his head. "Didn't I tell you before that if your cultivation base isn't at least in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm, you shouldn't go there? If you want to go inside, don't even think about it if your cultivation base isn't at least in the 10th layer. I also don't know the exact location of Heaven Forsaken's event this time." Ma Qingsheng continued, "Because this is a great opportunity. If nothing unexpected happens, you'll have a lot of chances to get some cultivation techniques and magic tools. Therefore, in order to keep it a secret, only a few people in Heaven Forsaken know the location. The majority can only listen to the arrangements." "Cultivation techniques?" Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. Then he smiled and said, "I's cultivation level is low. I'm just going to take a look. I don't have much hope. Not necessarily. Based on the experience of the past 3 years, obtaining cultivation arts, magical artifacts, and pills all depends on luck. It has little to do with one's cultivation. Ma Qingqiang shook his head and said, if fellow Taoist Xiao obtains an opportunity this time, perhaps his cultivation will also advance by leaps and bounds, leaving I and the others behind. I have never dared to think about such an immortal fate. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. That's right, fellow Taoist Xiao. There's something I need to tell you. Because we have to prepare for Tianqi's event these few days, there are a lot of loose cultivators in Huayan Park. I'm afraid there's no place for you. Ma Qingqiang suddenly said, oh, it doesn't matter. I have an inn in the south of the city that I can stay in. When it's time to depart tomorrow, or 2 days later, I will go to Huayan Yuan. Xiao Hua quickly said, I will send you a message talisman when the time comes. Ma Qingqiang nodded slightly. Upon seeing this, Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, then, I'll take my leave first. I'll wait for fellow Taoist Ma's message in the next 2 days. As he said this, he handed over a message talisman. Okay, I'll also make some preparations here. I won't keep fellow Taoist Xiao. Ma Qingqiang took the message talisman and said with a smile, that's right, fellow Taoist Xiao should also go and buy some yellow talismans and the like. There's certainly an opportunity this time, but there are also risks. It's better to have some ability to protect yourself. Then he said with some hesitation, actually, with fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation, you shouldn't go this time, but I feel that. Fellow Taoist Xiao should still go. Of course, if fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't go, that's also fine. Of course I will go. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, for fellow Taoist Ma to think of I can't thank you enough. The two of them spoke a few more words, and Xiao Hua took his leave of Huayan Park. Seeing that it was still early, he went to EG and wantonly bought some things before quickly returning to the inn. In the following 2 days, Xiao Hua didn't rest. He only focused on refining fireball talismans and confinement talismans. In addition to Xiao Hua's previous stockpile, he probably already had over 1,000 fireball talismans and confinement talismans. Seeing that the talisman ink was already used up, Xiao Hua stopped and muttered in his heart, could it be? Heaven Shi isn't bringing me along to play? Just as he was thinking, the inn's restrictions changed a little. Message talisman. Xiao Hua's heart stirred, and he opened the room's restrictions. A crimson brilliance flew before his eyes. When Xiao Hua took the message talisman in his hand, Ma Qingqiang's voice came through. Fellow Taoist Xiao, Heaven Shi's plan has changed. The time will be pushed back a few days. In the morning 10 days later, please come to Jingbua City's Xi'an Gate. I will be waiting for you there. 10 days later, Xiao Hua frowned and used his hand to pinch his chin, very puzzled. Heaven Shi, where is he going? Why is he being so mysterious? So many rogue cultivators are going. How can it not attract the attention of others? Yes, there are still 10 days. I'd better make the best use of my time to refine some fireball talismans. I'll refine as many as I can. Even though fireball talismans are of a lower level than confinement talismans, they win in terms of quantity and power. It's a good life-saving method. Soon after, Xiao Hua didn't delay and made another trip to EG. This time, he passed through bewilderment talismans and exchanged some confinement talismans and fireball talismans for talisman crafting materials. He didn't spend a single spirit stone. In the following 10 days, Xiao Hua didn't leave the gate. He wholeheartedly refined fireball talismans. Every day, he refined nearly 200 fireball talismans. In total, he refined more than 2,000 fireball talismans. Not only that, his cultivation also made some progress in these 10 days. Of course, this kind of progress was still insignificant in the eyes of others, but in Xiao Hua's eyes, it was already extremely satisfying. On the morning of the 10th day, Xiao Hua finished cultivating and left the house. He went to the inn's cabinet and took the remaining spirit stones. After asking about the location of Xi'an Gate, he hurriedly left the inn. Walking on the main street of Jingbua City, although there were many cultivators coming and going, the vast majority of them came from outside Jingbua City. Those who left the city, like Xiaohua, were still very few. Xiaohua walked for a while and felt a little confused. He raised his eyes and looked ahead. There was a cultivator walking slowly in front of him. Xiaohua wanted to go over and ask for directions, but before he could lift his foot, he suddenly saw that cultivator stop and stand there respectfully. Immediately, a light screen rose from the lake beside him and blocked in front of that cultivator. A Jinghua City disciple flashed out of the light screen and stood in front of that cultivator. The cultivator saluted respectfully, but the disciple waved his sleeve arrogantly and didn't return the salute. Then, the two of them seemed to start talking in low voices. Xiaohua knew that he couldn't go forward, but seeing that there was no fork in the road, he could only stand there. Fortunately, the cultivator only said a few words to the Jinghua City disciple. The Jinghua City disciple seemed to be angry. He pointed at the cultivator and said something loudly. His voice came along with the wind. "Serves you right. How many times have I told you, don't do these things? Don't do them. This time, you finally..." In the face of the Jinghua City disciple scolding, the cultivator could only bow repeatedly, as if he was apologizing. Then, the Jinghua City disciple waved his hand and flashed into the light screen. The light screen disappeared in a flash. The cultivator chased after it for a few steps, but to no avail. He also stopped, seeing that the two of them had dispersed. Xiaohua walked forward again. When he got closer, the cultivator seemed to hear the sound of footsteps and turned his head to take a look. When he saw the cultivator's face, Xiaohua was stunned. Huh, enemies really don't meet. Why is he here? That cultivator was the loose cultivator Chong Feng. Chong Feng glanced at Xiaohua and the several cultivators scattered around and fiercely scolded. What are you looking at? What's there to look at? Do you believe that I'll pinch you to death? Xiaohua's eyes shrunk. He originally wanted to retort, but then he changed his mind. This guy is just a piece of trash. He relies on his familiarity with the Jinghua City disciples to bully and dominate the market. Sooner or later. Let's not talk about sooner or later. He's already offended the Xuanyan school. As long as he leaves the Jinghua City's power range one day, how could there be a good end for him? Why is this young master shouting at him for no reason? Then, Xiaohua seemed to ignore Chong Feng's malicious words. He quickly took 2 steps forward and cupped his hands, asking, "Fellow Taoist, can you tell I where the Jinghua City Xian Gate is?" You have the ability to come in, but you don't have the ability to leave? Chong Feng turned his head and left as if he hadn't seen anything. Xiaohua coldly watched Chong Feng's back. It was unknown what he was thinking in his heart. After a while, he coldly snorted, looked around, and found a cultivator to ask for directions. It was currently early in the morning. Most people had already entered the Jinghua City. Xiaohua walked out of the Xian Gate. Before he could raise his eyes to look around, he saw someone calling his name in the distance. Needless to say, it was Ma Qingcheng, who had been abandoned by the heavens. Xiaohua quickly followed the direction of Ma Qingcheng's voice. At the edge of the bluestone pavement of Jinghua City, there were 6 cultivators around the 4th layer of the aura refining realm quietly waiting there. Xiaohua approached and hurriedly saluted. "Seniors, this junior has come late. I truly apologize." "Fellow Taoist Ma, you only said you were waiting for a fellow Taoist who had been abandoned by the heavens. I saw that everyone was at the 4th layer of the aura refining realm. So, I thought this fellow Taoist was also at the 4th layer of the aura refining realm, but I didn't expect it was actually a brat at the 2nd layer of the aura refining realm. Your arrangement will delay our journey." A cultivator with a centipede-shaped scar on his face immediately said coldly when he saw that Xiaohua's cultivation was low. Without waiting for Ma Qingcheng to speak, another cultivator also asked, "Fellow Taoist Ma, is this arrangement because of I?" When Xiaohua heard this voice, he felt it was very familiar. When that person came out from behind the others, Xiaohua clearly saw that it was the talisman master he had seen earlier, Li Xiaowen. Li Xiaowen's voice was as cold as usual. His face also had an unapproachable appearance, as if Li Xiaowen had hit the nail on the head. Ma Qingcheng's face was a bit embarrassed. He cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, there aren't many talisman masters in my heaven forsaken. I see that fellow Taoist Li's impression of fellow Taoist Xiao is pretty good. Moreover, fellow Taoist Xiao also needs someone to give him some pointers, so..." Chapter 1350. Huh? Fellow Taoist Xiao is a talisman master? A cultivator with a frown and a bitter face asked in astonishment. This, Junior, is not yet. Xiao Hua touched his nose and said embarrassedly, as long as fellow Taoist Li gives careful guidance, I believe fellow Taoist Xiao will soon become a talisman master of heaven forsaken. Ma Qingchang glanced at Li Xiaowen and said with a smile, "This is a treasure hunt, not an experience. Fellow Taoist, Ma, sending fellow Taoist Xiao to I is making things difficult for I." Li Xiaowen replied with a frown. Fellow Taoist Li is right. With fellow Taoist Xiao, this person with low cultivation, our movements will be much slower. We will also have misgivings if we encounter anything. I'm afraid it's not appropriate. Another fat cultivator with a bulge on his head also disagreed. Fellow Taoists don't know, but fellow Taoist Li understands in his heart. Fellow Taoist Zhao's talent is extremely good, but because of his status as a rogue cultivator, there is no one to guide him. Therefore, his talisman crafting technique has been unable to reach great success. If he can take advantage of this opportunity to temper himself, I believe fellow Taoist Xiao will soon be able to provide yellow talismans for heaven forsaken. If everyone can help fellow Taoist Xiao, it will be a great service. Ma Qingchang didn't seem to mind their opposition and casually explained. Everyone's eyes turned and looked at Li Xiaowen, seemingly waiting for his decision. Forget it. Who told I to suffer from not having anyone to guide me in the past? Since fellow Taoist Xiao met I, it can be considered fate. Li Xiaowen heard Ma Qingchang say this and knew he couldn't refuse. He could only nod and say, "However, heaven forsaken is not a cultivation sect. I also have no intention of taking in disciples, so I won't guide fellow Taoist Xiao for no reason. If fellow Taoist Xiao wants to learn talisman crafting technique, you have to show some sincerity. I know fellow Taoist Li is someone who considers the big picture. Fellow Taoist Xiao, why haven't you quickly thanked fellow Taoist Li?" Ma Qingchang said to Xiao Hua with a smile. Xiao Hua was helpless. He could only smile and bow. Many thanks for Senior Li's righteousness. Junior knows what to do. Okay, Li Xiaowen nodded. I'll be watching your performance. All right. Ma Qingchang clapped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Li's group is complete. Here, only fellow Taoist Xiao looks unfamiliar. Allow me to introduce you." Following that, Ma Qingcheng introduced everyone to him. The cultivator with the centipede-shaped scar was called Yong Shang. The fat cultivator with a bulge on his head was called Fan Dao Mao. The cultivator with a frown and a bitter expression was called Fu Shu. The tall cultivator with a dark face who hadn't spoken was called Sun Fian. Xiao Hua knew Li Xiaowen. Xiao Hua stepped forward one by one and saluted them with a very respectful attitude. After the introductions were finished, Ma Qingcheng patted his storage pouch and took out 6 silk pouches from inside. He handed them over and said, "These silk pouches must not be opened at this time. Everyone, put them in your storage pouches first." Xiao Hua and the others each took one. Xiao Hua looked at the small silk pouches in his hand and was rather puzzled, but he didn't ask. He put them in his storage pouch and calmly waited for Ma Qingcheng to open them. The others were different. Fan Dao Mao's 5 fingers moved slightly, playing with the silk pouches. He said curiously, "Inside, it's very thin. What could be inside?" Ma Qingcheng said in a low voice, "Presumably, everyone knows that in this activity, the chances of finding cultivation methods and spirit pills are very high. Therefore, I, heaven forsaken, have no choice but to be cautious and not let bystanders know as much as possible, especially those loose cultivators who haven't joined heaven forsaken yet. These loose cultivators some have extremely high cultivations, but their behavior is unreasonable and temperamental. If they knew, how could we have a chance? Moreover, these things are coveted by those cultivation sects and clans. We have no choice but to be cautious. The place to go is written inside these silk pouches. Everyone has one? Can't you just give us one? Li Xiaowen was somewhat dissatisfied. How could it be so simple, fellow Taoist Li? Ma Qingsheng smiled wryly. Fellow Taoist Qing spent a lot of effort to come up with this method. These 6 silk pouches are all different. I only know the first place you're going to. When you reach that place, among the 6 of you, only someone's silk pouch can be opened. The name of the place you're going to is written inside. The other 5 silk pouches can't be opened. When you reach the second place, only one of the remaining 5 silk pouches can be opened. In order, the last person's silk pouch is the place you're really going to. All right, this silk pouch can't be opened until you reach the place. If you forcibly open it, the things inside will self-destruct. None of the 6 people in your group can go. This. Not only was Xiao Hua dumbstruck, but Li Xiaowen and the others also looked at each other. In the end, their gazes all fell on Ma Qingqing's face. Is there a need to be so complicated? Fu Shu, whose brows were originally tightly knitted, asked with an even more miserable expression. I also don't want to, Ma Qingsheng said. But we Heaven Forsaken are all rogue cultivators. Maybe someone leaked it. For everyone's sake, we can only do this. Moreover, these 5 places are all the way to that place. At worst, we'll just take a detour. With everyone's cultivation, it's nothing. Go, what else can we say? Sun Fian, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. In addition, the 6 of you must arrive within 30 days. Otherwise, this silk pouch will self-destruct. Everyone still doesn't know where to go. Ma Qingsheng said with a smile. Are the others in Heaven Forsaken like this? Yong Shang asked. Yes, exactly. Even I have to be like this. Ma Qingsheng smiled wryly. When everyone heard this, it was unknown what expression they had on their faces. It seemed this was the first time they had encountered this kind of thing. Fellow Taoist Ma, please tell us the place we're going to first. Fan Dao Mao's face, which had a lot of flesh, was also stiff at this time. He asked with a fake smile. Okay. Ma Qingsheng looked around and sent out a silence note talisman. Then his lips moved slightly, and he said a place. Xiao Hua and the others heard it clearly. When Ma Qingsheng removed the silence note talisman, Li Xiaowen cupped his hands and said, Thank you, fellow Taoist Ma. We'll set off immediately. Fellow Taoists, let's go. I will also set off later. I hope we can meet up there and look for cultivation methods together. Ma Qingsheng cupped his hands and smiled. Thank you for your auspicious words. The 6 of them cupped their hands and took out flying talismans from their storage bags. Their figures suddenly flew up and headed in a direction. Xiao Hua Fei was the last. Before he left, he especially cupped his hands and thanked Ma Qingsheng. He knew in his heart that Ma Qingsheng must have put in a lot of effort to arrange him and Li Xiaowen together. He didn't need Li Xiaowen's so-called guidance, but he had to accept this favor. When Ma Qingsheng saw Xiao Hua express his thanks, a smile appeared on his face. He waved his hand slightly and quickly walked towards Jinghua City. Xiao Hua was flying in the air, somewhat hesitant. Li Xiaowen and the others weren't flying very fast, but they were all in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm, so they should be much faster than him, the 2nd layer aura refining cultivator. What should he do? Keeping a low profile. Sometimes it's not a good idea. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly to himself. Li Xiaowen obviously noticed and stopped in the air after flying for a while. These 5 5th layer qi refining loose cultivators should be led by Li Xiaowen, so they all stopped. Fellow Taoist Xiao, could it be that you didn't buy a slightly higher level flying talisman? Li Xiaowen frowned and said, Fellow Taoist Qing seemed to have already told me when we were in Huayan Park. You're only at the 2nd layer qi refining, so if you don't have a higher level flying talisman, how can you catch up with us? Xiao Hua's brows relaxed, and he slapped his forehead and said, Look at me, I forgot about this matter. Fellow Taoist Li, please go first. I will take out a higher level flying talisman. When Li Xiaowen heard this, he didn't say anything. He roused his magic power and activated the flying talisman, quickly flying forward. When everyone turned around and flew away, Xiao Hua patted his storage pouch. It was still the same flying talisman from before. He activated it with his magic power, and his speed immediately doubled, barely catching up to Li Xiaowen and the others. The left side of Jingbo City was surrounded by mountains and forests. The scenery could be considered beautiful. All kinds of strange trees stood in great numbers, and flowers and other things were also like brocades. It was unknown whether it was because of the two great formations in Jingbo City or because of the city's feng shui, but the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was very abundant. Xiao Hua flew with Li Xiaowen and the others for half a day, gradually leaving Jingbo City. The terrain beneath his feet also gradually became dangerous. The trees were no longer emerald green, and the water in the mountain stream no longer tinkled with the sound of flowing water. Instead, it was mostly surging water. Southern Kaiping? What is this place? I don't seem to have heard second senior brother mention it. I've also never heard anyone mention it in Jingbo City. As Xiao Hua flew, he thought about the location that Ma Qingsheng told everyone. But when Li Xiaowen and the others heard it, they understood. It seems that the five people's faces still have some strange expressions. The brilliance on their faces, what can it mean? Southern Kaiping. Is there anything special about it? The current Xiao Hua was no longer the Xiao Hua from several dozen days ago. He knew how to conceal his strength and conceal himself. He also knew how to endure silently. He absolutely wouldn't easily open his mouth to ask this kind of extremely low-level question. He believed that as long as they got closer to Southern Kaiping, one of the five people would definitely speak. Sure enough, after half a day, the sky gradually darkened. Li Xiaowen's flying speed slowed down. He looked at everyone, and then looked at the gradually approaching Xiao Hua. He waved his hand and said, "Fellow Taoists, with our speed, we should be able to reach Southern Kaiping tomorrow night. That place can't be passed through during the day either. Let's rest for the time being. Once we recover our magic power, we'll rush forward again. We can't pass through Southern Kaiping during the day." Xiao Hua heard clearly and couldn't help but stare blankly. What's the reason for this? How did fellow Taoist Qing arrange this? Why do we have to pass through Southern Kaiping? Can't we just change to a random place? Fu Shu said with a bitter face. Xiao Hua also couldn't tell whether or not he was feeling uncomfortable in his heart. Fellow Taoist Fu, there's no need to complain. We also don't know where that place is. Fellow Taoist Qing also arranged for Tianqi and so many other fellow Taoists to go, so you must have put in a lot of effort. We're only facing a bunch of flying insects. What's there to fear? Li Xiaowen said with a smile. To be continued. Chapter 1351. Fellow Taoist, Li naturally doesn't need to be afraid. That water-type iceworm is most afraid of fire. Fellow Taoist, Li only needs to throw out the fireball talismans he refined. How can it not be easy to pass? Yongshang said with a smile. When he spoke, the centipede-like scar on his face looked even more frightening. Fellow Taoist Yong says it so easily. Li Xiaowen slightly shook his head. The ice worm is a second-grade demon beast. It's recorded in the Beast Horde Atlas. It's not something that can be restrained by low-grade fireball talismans. On the contrary, if I were to bring a fireball talisman over, I'd be restrained by the ice worm. No matter what, fellow Taoist, Li has the highest cultivation among us. Moreover, you're a talisman master. You must have a lot of yellow talismans on you. Tomorrow night, when the ice worm hibernates and swallows the moonlight, we'll have to rely on fellow Taoist Li's yellow talismans to safely pass through. Everyone, don't you agree? Fan Dao Mao clapped his hands. Exactly, exactly. Everyone at the side echoed, making Li Xiaowen somewhat passive. To be honest, he also didn't expect to go to the Southern Kaiping. In this storage pouch, there were quite a few fireball talismans. Fire serpent talismans, fire rain talismans, and other high-grade fire attribute yellow talismans, he really didn't prepare many. Thus, Li Xiaowen said sternly, I may be a talisman master, but I'm inclined toward water. Icicle talismans are I's forte. Otherwise, fellow Taoist Ma wouldn't have sent fellow Taoist Xiao to our group. As for water-type yellow talismans against ice worms, I don't need to say it. Everyone knows that they won't have any effect unless it's some high-grade icebound talisman. Therefore, tomorrow we'll have to work together to face the enemy. Fellow Taoist Xiao also has a water-type constitution. Sun Fian, who hadn't spoken all this time, said somewhat astonishingly, I wonder how much of the 5 elements water attribute accounts for? How much? Xiao Hua was startled. His brows slightly wrinkled, but then his expression returned to normal. He said with a smile, Junior only knows that I have a water-type constitution. I don't know how much it accounts for. Could it be that Senior Sun has seen through it? Sun Fian glanced at Li Xiaowen and said, Ordinary cultivators have all 5 elements in their physique. It's only when one of the 5 elements is more prominent that this attribute can be revealed. For example, the wood attribute accounts for 40% of the physique. The other 4 elements, water, fire, earth, and metal, account for the remaining 60%. I is naturally the wood attribute. Of course, if I's would attribute only accounts for 30% of my body, I's constitution would be much worse than my current constitution. What is fellow Taoist Sun trying to say? I also know about this. Xiao Hua asked somewhat strangely. In my early years, I obtained a cultivation technique which allowed me to set foot on the path of cultivation. And at the end of the cultivation technique, there was a small spell. This spell was exactly the same as the ordinary detection spell, but it was more profound and mysterious. It was used to detect the attributes of others. Sun Fian laughed and said, It's just that I only learned a little bit of it, and wasn't very proficient in it. Fellow Taoist Sun, could it be that you know how much of I's water attribute accounts for? Xiao Hua was very surprised. Sun Fian slightly shook his head. From what I saw, not only is fellow Taoist Xiao not a water attribute, but it's the complete opposite of water attribute. You should have a fire attribute physique. Xiao Hua's heart was greatly shaken. He really didn't think that on this Dawn Rain continent, there would actually be such a mystical spell that could directly see the attributes of others without using any magic tools. Just as Xiao Hua's mind was spinning rapidly, trying to find an excuse to cover it up, and Li Xiaowen and the others were also extremely flabbergasted looking at Xiao Hua. Sun Fian's face again revealed a perplexed expression and said, But if I used that spell again to look carefully, fellow Taoist Zhao's physique would change to any one of the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Furthermore, any one of the attributes of the physique accounts for 100%. How can that be? Li Xiaowen cried out in shock. How can there be a single attribute person in this world? How can there be a person in this world who can switch attributes? Senior Sun, I don't really understand what you're saying. I only know that I have a water attribute physique. What single attribute? What conversion? I don't understand. Xiao Hua said without batting an eyelid. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't blame me. I also didn't learn much. I only took a rough look. Don't take it seriously. Don't take it seriously. After Sun Fian finished speaking, he lowered his head again. It was unknown whether he was pondering or ashamed. I saw fellow Taoist Zhao's icicle talisman. Although he didn't succeed in the end, according to what fellow Taoist Xiao said, he couldn't refine the fireball talisman. He could still barely write the icicle talisman. If it's not a water attribute physique, then what is it? Okay, let's talk about some details for tomorrow. What physique? What 5 elements? What do these have to do with the ice worms tomorrow night? Fan Daomao said impatiently. I feel that if fellow Taoist Xiao has a fire attribute physique, and if he can understand fire attribute magic. Sun Fian raised his head and said, but before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Fan Daomao. Even if fellow Taoist Xiao has a fire attribute physique and understands fire attribute magic, looking at his cultivation, Is it useful? Xiaohua was a little annoyed in his heart. He secretly said, "You two are talking among yourselves. Why are you dragging I into this? I's magic power is low, but it's not up to you to open your mouths and say it, right? Okay. Everyone, there's no need to argue anymore," Li Xiaowen quickly said. "We'd better rest while preparing for tomorrow's situation." After that, everyone stopped and found a secluded mountain forest. Everyone found a suitable place to sit cross-legged and regulate their dermic powers. Li Xiaowen flew up again and circled about 100 feet to the left. He reached into his storage bag and took out a few ordinary-looking yellow talismans. He activated them with his dermic powers and hit them on the ground, causing them to disappear. Xiaohua watched curiously. A thought emerged in his heart. It seemed this method was somewhat familiar to him. When Li Xiaowen landed on the ground, he waved his hand and a yellow talisman that was a lot bigger than the others appeared. He activated his magic power and unfurled it against the wind. The yellow talisman suddenly burst into flames, but the way it burned was different from the normal yellow talismans. The ball of flames floated in the air, and when all the yellow talismans had burned out, the ball of flames slowly rotated and divided into two layers. The lower layer condensed into a ball of flames that gradually fell, while the upper layer scattered into a net of flames. When the ball of flames was about to land on the ground, the net of flames expanded in all directions and divided into several small nets that flew in all directions. They were flying in the direction where Li Xiaowen had placed the yellow talisman. With a light bang, the fireball in front of Li Xiaowen fell into the ground and disappeared. At the same time, the scattered fire net also fell into the ground where the yellow talisman had hit. A slight gust of cold wind was produced where the fireball fell. A thin net formed by spiritual energy also formed around the cold wind. After the net formed by spiritual energy rose into the air, it scattered in all directions. It landed at the place where the fire net had disappeared and stopped. Xiaohua didn't have divine sense. Of course, he couldn't see the situation. However, Li Xiaowen's method made him somewhat understand. Sure enough, Yong Shang, who was sitting cross-legged at the side, praised, "Fellow Taoist Li really has a good method. This warning talisman is a high-grade yellow talisman that is hard to find." Li Xiaowen's face was slightly proud. He nodded slightly. "Fellow Taoist Yong actually knows about this warning talisman. It's also rare and commendable. I have only heard of it. I've never seen it before. I didn't expect that walking around with fellow Taoist Li would actually broaden my horizons. I really admire you." Yongshang turned his head towards Xiao Hua with a smile and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, fellow Taoist Li is your master in heaven forsaken. If you want to become famous in the cultivation world, you still have to practice more with fellow Taoist Li. I have never thought of accepting a disciple," Li Xiaowen said coldly. He walked to the side and sat cross-legged. He closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. Xiaohua's face was strange. He used his hand to scratch his head. He also didn't say anything. He directly distanced himself from everyone and rested. In the time it took to eat a meal, everyone's magic power was abundant. Only then did they gather together and discuss tomorrow's matters in low voices. Xiaohua walked to the side and only quietly listened. He didn't interrupt. In the time it took to eat another meal, Xiaohua understood that the southern Rainbow Plain was a dangerous place. It was the name of a large area of high slopes in the Manjushu mountain range. There were many peaks in the Manjushu mountain range that towered into the clouds. There were endless dangers within. If one wanted to pass through the Manjushu mountain range, they had to go through the southern Rainbow Plain. The southern Rainbow Plain was abnormally rich in heaven and earth spirit chi. There were strange spirit grasses growing there. It wasn't much inferior to the heavenly paradise. Cultivators would often come here to pick spirit grasses. However, there were two dangerous places in the southern Rainbow Plain. The first was the climate, which was very cold. Within 100 li of the southern Rainbow Plain, besides the fact that there was no snow, it was like winter. Cold ice and cold wind constantly blew. Only cultivators could enter. The second was the southern rainbow plain. The iceworms moved in groups. Once they came out, they would cover the sky and earth. It was very frightening. The iceworms were extremely sensitive to human flesh and blood. As long as a cultivator appeared near the iceworms would definitely swarm over and stick to the cultivator's body. Cultivators with profound cultivation would either exterminate the iceworms or escape on their own. As for those who couldn't escape, they would be submerged by the iceworms and finally frozen into ice pillars. Fortunately, after the observation of many cultivators, the appearance of the iceworms in the southern rainbow plain was very regular. They would appear frequently during the day and were rarely seen at night. If they were prepared and passed through the southern rainbow plain at night, there wouldn't be too much danger. However, Li Xiaowen and the others came here in a hurry. How could they have made sufficient preparations? Fortunately, Li Xiaowen was a talisman master and had a lot of yellow talismans in his storage pouch. Everyone wasn't nervous. After roughly arranging the matters for tomorrow night, Li Xiaowen took out some fireball talismans from his storage pouch and distributed them to everyone. As for Xiaohua, Li Xiaowen didn't give him any fireball talismans. Because in tomorrow's operation, Xiaohua was placed in the middle. As long as everyone was fine, Xiaohua would naturally be fine. As for Xiaohua, saying that he also had some fireball talismans in his storage pouch, Li Xiaowen directly ignored it and said with a smile, "How can the fireball talismans you bought from the market be compared to the fireball talismans I refined? Those low-grade goods. You should keep them for your own protection." Chapter 1352. At night, everyone rested within Li Xiaowen's warning talisman. Xiaohua was not far from them, but the strange starlight he attracted during his night cultivation was invisible to the naked eye and spiritual sense, so it did not attract the attention of others. Early in the morning, the birds in the forest chirped. Xiaohua and the others also stopped cultivating. They saw Li Xiaowen walk to the location of the warning talisman and point his finger. With magic power, a somewhat dim fireball rose from the ground. When he held it in his hand, the dim fire net in the surroundings simultaneously flew out from the ground and gathered together. Li Xiaowen patted the fireball in his hand, and it turned back into a yellow talisman. Soon after, several yellow talismans in the surroundings also flew back and entered Li Xiaowen's hand. Mother and child talisman. Xiaohua saw this and suddenly thought of a high-grade yellow talisman he heard about in E.G. Li Xiaowen held the mother and child warning talisman in his hand and looked at the somewhat blurry runes on the yellow talisman. He patted his hand and put it into his storage pouch. He looked up at the gradually brightening eastern horizon and smiled. "Fellow Taoists, have you rested well? Today, we need to rush to Southern Cultivation. We don't have much free time in between." "Ha, fellow Taoist Li. As long as you rest well, we will naturally rest well." Fellow Taoist should be saying this to fellow Taoist Xiao. Fan Daomao tidied up his Taoist robe and said with a smile, "I have rested well and can set off at any time." Xiaohua had a smile on his face and was already quietly standing to the side. "Good, in that case, let's get up." Li Xiaowen took out a flight talisman and stuck it on his body. He soared into the sky. Xiaohua and the others also flew up like yesterday. The day was silent. When the sun set, Xiaohua saw a row of mountains in the distance like a dam, directly blocking their path. It was the Sushu mountain range. The mountain range was very continuous with no end in sight. Li Xiaowen flew in front and said, "Fellow Taoists, the Sushu mountain range is already in sight. The southern color ping is just ahead. We still need to put in more effort and rush to the entrance of the valley before nightfall. If it gets dark, I'm afraid there will be some trouble outside the valley." After saying that, he didn't wait for the others to respond and sped up. The others naturally knew how dangerous it was, so they didn't dare to be negligent and followed closely behind. Xiaohua didn't want to reveal his speed, so he opened up a bit of distance. Although Xiaohua had already seen the Gushu mountain range, it took him a lot of effort to fly to the mountain range. Looking at the round moon in the sky like a mirror, Xiao Hua suddenly felt that his surroundings were starting to become cold and clear. Could it be that Nankaping is just ahead? Xiao Hua raised his eyes and looked at the faintly visible valley entrance in front of him. Under the clear moonlight, the valley entrance was like a deep crack carved into the mountain range. At this moment, Li Xiaowen and the others stopped and waited for Xiao Hua. Li Xiaowen said in a low voice, "Everyone's itinerary is just as we expected. We arrived at the Qiushu mountain range before midnight. Nankaping is just ahead. Let's line up in a formation. According to yesterday's discussion, we will quietly pass through and not cause any trouble. Yes, we will listen to fellow Taoist Li's instructions," everyone said in low voices. Xiao Hua also flew up and arrived in the middle of the group. Li Xiaowen glanced at Xiao Hua and also said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, your cultivation is shallow and is originally a burden for us this time. However, fellow Taoist also has a silk pouch in his storage pouch. In order to not affect the entire plan abandoned by the heavens, I and the other fellow Taoists could only bring you along. This Nankaping can be said to be a dangerous place in the Gushu mountain range. Admittedly, we will protect fellow Taoist here, but fellow Taoist mustn't lower his guard and rely on us for everything. If there is any danger, we can protect ourselves, but it's still beyond our power to protect fellow Taoist. Therefore, I will say the ugly words first. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you should be prepared. Don't think that we have to protect you just because you have the silk pouch." Xiao Hua nodded and cupped his hands in salute. "Thank you for your protection, fellow Taoists. I will be careful in Nankaping. If there is any accident, I definitely won't dare to implicate you. And since fellow Taoist Xiao said so, I naturally understand the sadness in our hearts." Li Xiaowen nodded and took out 6 yellow talismans from his bosom. He gave one to each person and said, "This is a consecutive note talisman. If you encounter a group of ice worms in Nankaping and someone gets separated, you can use this yellow talisman to contact each other. Although this consecutive note talisman can be used many times, fellow Taoists, please be careful and use it more in the future." After everyone put away the consecutive note talisman, Li Xiaowen looked at the sky and said, "Okay, we should also go. The weather in Nankaping is cold. Our cultivation may be affected, and our flying talismans may be damaged. If we don't pass through Nankaping before dawn, I'm afraid it will be very troublesome." Finished speaking, Li Xiaowen took the lead and flew away. Yongshang, Fan Daomao, and Xiao Hua followed closely behind. Fu Shu and Sun Fian flew at the back. At this time, Xiao Hua also didn't hesitate. He didn't care about hiding his flying speed and followed closely behind Fan Daomao. This actually made Fu Shu and Sun Fian let out a sigh of relief. If Xiao Hua flew slowly, it wouldn't be convenient for them to fly too fast when there wasn't any danger. As the 6 people flew closer to the Mangshu mountain range, Xiao Hua felt that the weather was even colder. The air he exhaled from his mouth also became white. Xiao Hua's exposed hands also felt a piercing cold. He silently operated his heart, sutra, and magic power gushed out from his body, blocking that cold outside of his body. Xiao Hua looked at the towering mountain peak on his left and was somewhat astonished. The climate of this Xiaoyu continent is really a bit strange. This place is only a day's distance from Jinghua City, but the difference is actually so big. Could it be that there's something fishy here? Just as Xiao Hua's imagination was running wild, they had already arrived in front of the Mangshu mountain range. Above the mountain range was a layer of hard ice. The patterns between the mountain rocks were transparent and visible. Under the moonlight, the entire ice layer reflected a strange brilliance. The entire mountain range was almost like a crystal. Fellow Taoists, be a bit careful. We are about to enter. Up ahead, Li Xiaowen reminded in a low voice. He patted his storage pouch and took out a few fireball talismans. Xiao Hua and the others also took out yellow talismans and carefully followed Li Xiaowen into the valley entrance. Everyone flew in the air. Their shadows were cast on the ground by the moon. rapidly streaking forward below everyone. Countless craggy mountain rocks were covered in a layer of ice. They were like motionless monsters. Everyone's shadows were cast over. Between movement and stillness, it appeared very strange. However, just as everyone entered the valley, the 6 people's shadows shuttled back and forth between 2 blankly standing rocks in the valley. Those rocks actually faintly moved. Immediately afterwards, the 2 rocks actually stood up and slowly turned in the direction of the 6 people in the distance. Once Xiao Hua and the others gradually disappeared into the darkness, a soft voice echoed, "Huh? This? Which sect disciples are they?" "Senior Marshal Brother." They flew over too suddenly. Little Brother didn't expect that there would be people passing through the southern color plains on a full moon night. Therefore, I simply didn't see clearly. I also don't know which sect disciples these cultivators are from. They shouldn't be disciples of some large sect. The voice from before muttered to itself. Even my spirit husbandry sect knows that the ice worms will act strangely on a full moon night. If it wasn't for some special reason, I definitely wouldn't have come to the southern color plains. The 6 of them actually came together. They really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Perhaps they are loose cultivators? Another voice probed. Little Brother, the cultivation of the last 2 people doesn't seem to be high. Who cares if they're loose cultivators or not? Even if they are from Shu and Yin school or Chi-Chiao sect, so what? Since they dare to come to the southern color plains on a full moon night, even if they die without a burial ground, who can they blame? Besides, we were thinking hard about how to lure that thing out, and they actually came knocking on our door. This is the best bait that the heavens have given us. That's right, Junior Marshal Brother. Let's go take a look. As they spoke, the 2 stones flashed and turned into 2 short and fat young men. The 2 young men clapped their hands and took out flying talismans from the storage pouches on their waists. Using their magic power, they flew into the air. Looking at their flying speed, they were more than twice as fast as Li Xiaowen and the others. They should be cultivators around the 7th layer of Qi refining. Xiao Hua and the others didn't pay attention to what was happening behind them. They only focused on the movements in the valley. At this time, the valley was very quiet. Not a sound could be heard. Even the chirping of insects at night could not be heard. It was terrifyingly quiet. As soon as they entered the valley, the stone walls on both sides blocked the moonlight. Occasionally, some low gaps would reveal some moonlight. Only then could they see some light. The rest of the place was pitch black. Xiao Hua didn't dare to utter a word. Holding his breath, he relied on his senses to follow behind Fan Dao Mao. The shadows of the surrounding tall mountains were like monsters with their mouths wide open. They could suppress Xiao Hua with their dark aura alone. After flying for nearly the time it took to eat a meal, Xiao Hua and the others turned around a mountain ridge. The scenery in front of them changed again. It was no longer oppressive darkness, but a silver, flat ground. Calling it flat ground was inappropriate. The flat ground was quite high. It wasn't a common flat ground. Instead, it was a series of hills connected together, forming a large plateau. Southern Kaiping. When Xiao Hua saw the plateau, the name of the plateau appeared in his mind. When he carefully looked again, it was indeed true. Even though the plateau was completely covered in silver light and transparent ice, there were still lush green spirit grasses growing on the plateau. They were extremely lush, as if they didn't fear the cold of the southern Kaiping. When Li Xiaowen saw the southern Kaiping, his eyes also revealed joy. However, he didn't dare to lower his guard at all. The closer he got to the southern Kaiping, the slower he slowed down. At the same time, he also paid attention to the movements in his surroundings. However, the surroundings were still deathly quiet. Even when Xiao Hua and the others landed on the southern Kaiping, they didn't notice anything unusual. Okay, fellow Taoists, we have successfully arrived at the southern Kaiping. Fellow Taoists, take a look at your storage pouches. Which one of them can be opened? Li Xiaowen concealed his joy and whispered, I still pouch has changed. The one who spoke was the fat Fan Mao. As he spoke, Fan Mao took out his silk pouch from his storage pouch. Sure enough, Fan Mao's silk pouch was already faintly emitting a light. Following the absorption of the cold and frost energy, the silk pouch's light became increasingly brighter. Chapter 1353. Fellow Taoist Fan. Hurry up and put the silk pouch into your storage pouch. Don't let the light startle the ice worm. Li Xiaowen urged with a frown. Yes, I was careless. When Fan Mao heard this, he was shocked and hurriedly put the silk pouch into his storage bag. However, the silk pouch was very strange. Once it was put into his storage bag, it lost the cold spiritual energy of Nan Kaiping and immediately became dim. It returned to its previous state of being unable to be opened. This won't do, fellow Taoist Li. Once the silk pouch is put into the storage pouch, it will lose its light. Fan Mao bitterly smiled and took out the silk pouch that had lost its light. As soon as it appeared, it immediately gathered the surrounding spiritual energy. Strange. Li Xiaowen's brows furrowed even tighter than before. He curiously asked, when did my heaven-forsaken sect have such a wondrous refining technique? It can't be that fellow Taoist Qing custom-made silk pouch from Qiqiao sect, right? Li Xiaowen didn't know, and the others were even more clueless. Xiao Hua looked at the silk pouch with interest and couldn't help but think of a suitable rogue cultivator and a suitable Taoist robe. The silk pouch in Fan Mao's hand grew brighter and brighter until it gradually became the size of fist, like a budding flower bud. Sure enough, a moment later, the flower bud really bloomed. When the flower bud completely opened, a familiar voice softly said, "Fellow Taoists, this trip is very important, so I had no choice but to do this. Please forgive me. The next place you need to go is Yulian Mountains. Fellow Taoists, please be careful." Xiao Hua understood that the voice belonged to Qing Fengmin. Yulian Mountains? He bitterly smiled in his heart. This name was the same as Nan Kaiping. He had never heard of it before. However, Xiao Hua slightly tilted his head and looked at Fu Shu beside him. Fu Shu's brows were tightly knitted, and now they were locked. Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Yulian Mountains is even more dangerous than Nan Kaiping? However, they all say that Nan Kaiping is more dangerous, but from the looks of it, it's not that dangerous. As long as we pass through it at night, we just have to be careful, Xiao Hua thought to himself. But just as he was cursing in his heart, a weak voice, like the surging tide on the surface of the water, was transmitted over. What is this? Xiao Hua stared blankly for a moment, then looked at Fan Mao's hand. The brilliance had already dissipated, and an ordinary-looking silk pouch was left in his hand. Fan Mao was also somewhat stunned as he looked towards the source of the sound. The voice came from a mountain peak far to the left of Xiao Hua. The mountain peak was very bright under the moonlight, like a bright sword piercing the night sky. On the almost brightly lit peak, something brighter than an ice cube gradually flew closer and gradually enlarged. In just a few breaths of time, that thing had enlarged several times. Xiao Hua could already clearly see that it wasn't something, but rather tiny flying insects. Those flying insects were very snow white and shone brightly under the moonlight. Iceworm? Xiao Hua almost moaned out loud. Iceworm? Li Xiaowen still didn't seem to be able to see clearly. When he heard Xiao Hua call out, he was also greatly alarmed. He turned his head and asked, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, have you seen an iceworm before?" Xiao Hua stared blankly, then pointed his finger and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, those snow-white flying insects, could it be that they aren't iceworms?" When Li Xiaowen turned his head again, he could already see clearly. Li Xiaowen's complexion greatly changed as he anxiously said, "They really are iceworms." Soon after, he looked left and right in panic, then pointed his finger and said, "Fellow Taoists, quickly fly over there." At this moment, how could everyone still have the time to hesitate? Naturally, It didn't care about order and swarmed towards the direction Li Xiaowen pointed out. Xiao Huan naturally chased after them. But before he flew away, he turned his head to take a look. Those ice worms were flying very quickly. In just a short while, they had already gotten a lot closer. That small thing just now had become a flying insect swarm about 10 zhong wide. In that swarm of ice worms, each ice worm was about the size of a fingernail. Their specific appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but looking at the size of this swarm of ice worms, perhaps there were hundreds or thousands of them. Xiao Hua felt a chill run down his spine. He urged the flying talisman to quickly fly away. But the moment he flew away, his eyes unexpectedly discovered that there were several different things in front of the swarm of ice worms. Were those? They look several times bigger than ice worms, and their color is also red. They don't seem to be ice worms. Xiao Hua could only wonder. How could he think about it in detail? Fellow Taoists, quickly take out the weak water talisman and protect yourselves. This way, the ice worms won't be able to discover us. Li Xiaowen whispered. This was also what everyone had discussed last night. The weak water talisman could create a water-based defense around the body. Combined with the cold of the southern Kaiping, it could block the heat of the flesh and blood, not attracting the attention of the ice worms. The direction that Li Xiaowen pointed to was a pitch-black place. When everyone got closer, they discovered that there were some protruding ice thorns. They couldn't help but be overjoyed. Each of them found a secret place to hide behind the ice thorns. Xiao Hua arrived a little late. When he looked around again, there was already no place to hide. Xiao Hua had no choice but to look around. On the upper left side of the ice thorns, there was a protruding platform that was faintly blocked. Xiao Hua didn't dare to hesitate and quickly flew over. When Xiao Hua landed on the platform, he immediately used the weak water talisman. The thin brilliance absorbed the unique cold of the southern Kaiping, causing Xiao Hua's body to feel cold. The platform was only 3 qi in size. In front of it was a protrusion that was half the height of a person. It seemed to be an icicle or a stone. Xiao Hua half crouched behind the protrusion, revealing half of his head and carefully looking at the ice worms. In this moment, the ice worms had already arrived at the place where Xiao Hua and the others were. The surrounding temperature had also dropped a lot because of the ice worms' appearance. The ice worms didn't discover Xiao Hua and the others. They still flew in their original direction, towards the place where Xiao Hua and the others entered the valley. And, fortunately, we weren't discovered. These hundreds and thousands of ice worms swarming and pouncing on a person's body are not meant to freeze a person into a popsicle. Even with the fireball talisman, I'm afraid it won't be easy to drive them away. Xiao Hua secretly said that he was lucky. He thought that when the ice worms flew far away, he would quickly leave with Li Xiaowen and the others. Just as Xiao Hua, no, even Li Xiaowen and the others heaved a sigh of relief, a sharp chirp suddenly came from below the valley. Following that sound, several red things in front of the ice worms suddenly turned around and flew towards the ice spikes where Li Xiaowen and the others were. What's going on? Xiao Hua was stunned when he saw this. However, the place where the sound came from was pitch black, and he couldn't see anything. It was impossible for him to know where the sound came from. Is it other cultivators? Or other demonic beasts? Xiao Hua only had time to think this. Those ice worms had already flown in front of the ice spikes where Li Xiaowen and the others were. Let's go, Li Xiaowen shouted. The 5 of them flew up and scattered into the air. At first, the ice worms didn't seem to notice Li Xiaowen and the others, but when Li Xiaowen and the others flew into the air, the ice worms swayed like ripples in water. Soon after, they divided into several groups. Except for a group that chased after the red things in front, the rest chased after Li Xiaowen and the others. Xiao Hua hid behind a block of ice and peeked clearly. Those red things in front of him weren't ice worms, but a kind of flying insect that was about the size of a fist. Its entire body was fiery red, and it had a red and black eye on its head. 2 pointed, small triangular ears were erected on both sides of its eyes. The edges of its flapping wings were connected to its body by a thin membrane. It looked a bit like a bat, but it was also very far from a bat. The ice worms behind them looked like snow. They didn't have any eyes, only 6 or 7 antennae extended from their heads, swaying slightly in the air. The ice worms had a pair of wings on both sides. When they flapped, they made a slight, strange sound. Li Xiaowen and the others' reaction couldn't be said to be fast, but the ice worms were even faster. Fu Shu, who was at the back, flew about 10 feet before the ice worms behind him caught up. Those ice worms were also special. They were originally a bit faster than Fu Shu, but when they closed in, their speed suddenly increased by more than 2 times. They crashed into Fu Shu like a stone crashing into a rock. The force wasn't very strong, but when the ice worms crashed into the light of the weak water talisman on Fu Shu's body, they immediately turned into something like a snowflake. The strange thing was when the light of the weak water talisman touched that thing, a large area around it immediately turned white and gradually turned into ice. Fu Shu was shocked. He finally knew why cultivators were so afraid of these ice worms. This was just one ice worm. If hundreds of ice worms were to crash together, who would be able to withstand it? Without hesitation, Fu Shu slapped his hand and took out a fireball talisman from his storage bag. He activated his transcendence energy and threw it behind him without looking. A fireball flew out from his hand and smashed into the swarm of ice worms with a soft boom. The fireball exploded. The flames scattered in all directions, creating a bull-sized gap in the swarm of ice worms behind him. However, this gap only lasted for a moment. Only a few ice worms disappeared in the flames. The rest of the ice worms surged and chased after Fu Shu. At this moment, how could Fu Shu have any misgivings about others? He slapped his waist and took out a stack of yellow talismans from his storage bag. As he activated the flying talisman to fly into the distance, he threw out the fireball talismans one by one. Following Fu Shu's first fireball talisman, Li Xiaowen, Yongshang, and the others' fireball talismans also began to explode one after another. The entire southern Kaiping was abnormally lively. Xiao Hua hid behind a block of ice and quietly watched all of this without moving. From the current situation, his hiding place should still be safe. He hadn't been discovered by the ice worms yet. If he could continue to hide and wait for everyone to lure the ice worms away, he would be very happy. But at this moment, Xiao Hua suddenly felt a scorching aura coming from the top of his head. Chapter 1354. Xiao Hua's heart was restless. He wanted to hide behind a block of ice to avoid the ice worm's attack, but he suddenly felt a scorching aura above his head. When he raised his head to look, he couldn't help but be shocked. One of the red flying insects in front of the ice worm had unknowingly flown above his head. The red flying insect's black and red eyes were staring straight at Xiao Hua. Although Xiao Hua couldn't look directly at it like a human, he knew that the flying insect had already discovered him. Immediately after, a buzzing sound entered Xiao Hua's ears. When he turned his head to look, a group of ice worms were flying towards the depression he was in. Xiao Hua suddenly realized that the scorching heat emitted by the unknown flying insect must have attracted the ice worms. But were these unknown flying insects also ice worms? He didn't seem to have heard Li Xiaowen mention them. Xiao Hua thought in his heart, but he didn't dare to be negligent. Just now, he had already seen the strange state of the ice worms when they collided with Fu Shu's body. Moreover, Li Xiaowen and the other fourth-layer qi refining cultivators were very afraid, so he didn't dare to let the ice worms get close to him. Xiao Hua's eyes swept over, and he urged his transcendence energy. His figure quickly flew to the side. At this time, he didn't dare to hold back. His flying speed was several times faster than an 11th layer qi refining cultivator. Xiao Hua didn't move, but the moment he moved, he was immediately discovered by the ice worms. A portion of the ice worms that were originally flying towards the red flying insect also split up and chased after Xiao Hua. However, this was only a matter of a moment. Just as Xiao Hua flew away, the red flying insect above his head unexpectedly didn't plan on letting him go. It also flapped its membrane-like wings and flew out after Xiao Hua's figure. Its speed was unexpectedly not slower than Xiao Hua's, and just as the ice worms split up a bit, they immediately merged back into one and chased after Xiao Hua. As Xiao Hua flew into the valley, he stole glances behind him. He had already seen the situation of the ice worm and the red flying insect. He was slightly alarmed. He had always been confident in his flying speed, but he didn't expect the ice worm and the unknown flying insect to be no slower than him. Looking into the distance, Fu Shu, Fan Dao Mao, and company were in an even worse state. They kept casting fireball charms in their hands, hoping to use fireballs to block the ice worm's attack. This is bad, although such a large movement can block the ice worms behind it and even exterminate some of them, but there can't be only so few ice worms in the southern color plains, right? If they attracted a large wave of ice worms, how could they pass through this valley? If I were to escape with them, I'm afraid it would be even more dangerous, right? Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. He originally wanted to fly to the side of the crowd, but his figure unconsciously stopped. Ha! An ice worm flying at the front bumped into the brilliance of Xiao Hua's weak water talisman. Just like what Xiao Hua saw a moment ago, the brilliance immediately turned into ice. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. He quickly turned and flew in another direction. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and touched the ice on his body. That ice was different from ordinary ice. It was extremely cold to the touch. Moreover, it was hard, almost as hard as a rock. Xiao Hua frowned. He exerted strength in his hand, wanting to crush that ice. However, that ice was slippery and unexpectedly didn't have any effect. Xiao Hua pinched it a few times, but it didn't have any effect. In a hurry, Xiao Hua took out the magic spear tip from his space without hesitation. He didn't dare to use the spear tip to face himself. Instead, he used the back of the spear tip and used all his strength to hit the ice. Gotcha! The ice was shattered. However, it wasn't only the ice that was shattered. The layer of weak water talisman on Xiao Hua's body flickered a few times and was also broken at the same time. Xiao Hua was somewhat depressed. He thought, if I used the weak water talisman to protect my body, I would be turned into ice after being hit by the ice worm. However, if I didn't protect my body, wouldn't my body be frozen into ice after being hit? Should I try the iron cloak talisman? While thinking, he patted his storage pouch and took out another iron cloak talisman. However, he still didn't dare to stop. He flew while thinking. Fortunately, his flying speed was fast enough. Although the ice worm and the unknown flying insect were following closely behind him, Xiao Hua's vigilant shuttling back and forth and constantly changing directions made him seem to be somewhat at ease. He was in a much better situation than Fu Shu and the others. Ha! Another sound rang out. An ice worm took advantage of the moment when Xiao Hua was turning and hit him. As Xiao Hua expected, the iron cloak talisman also couldn't stop the ice worm. At the place where the ice worm hit, the brilliance also turned into ice. And I understand, as long as it's spiritual chi of heaven and earth, no matter what attribute it is, as long as the ice worm hits it, it will turn into ice. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth will also turn into ice. Xiao Hua was slightly alarmed. He knew that all the defensive yellow talismans in his storage pouch wouldn't be of much use. Perhaps only the fireball talisman would be useful. However, just as Xiao Hua was about to take out the fireball talisman, he discovered another strange thing. That unknown red flying insect was flying extremely fast, even faster than Xiao Hua by a bit. However, this red flying insect only followed behind Xiao Hua and didn't crash into Xiao Hua's body. Instead, it was the ice insect that was slower than the red flying insect that was scrambling to catch up to Xiao Hua, looking for an opportunity to crash into Xiao Hua's body. Why is that? Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. Could it be that this flying insect is the ice worm's commander? Doesn't it do its own work? While thinking, Xiao Hua's mind turned. He changed the fireball talisman in his hand to a confinement talisman. He used his magic power to cover the red flying insect. The red flying insect was also very alert. Without waiting for the confinement talisman to get close, it immediately flew downwards and dodged it in the blink of an eye. On the contrary, the ice worms behind it couldn't dodge in time and were trapped by the confinement talisman. What made Xiaohua even more surprised was that when the ice worms were hit by the confinement talisman, their wings stopped moving. Their antennae also stopped moving. Then, like ice grains, they fell straight down. Little thing, I don't believe that I can't kill you. Xiaohua used the corner of his eye to glance at the red flying insect that had just dodged his confinement talisman and was following behind him again. His heart became ruthless. With a shake of his hand, he took out 4 to 5 confinement talismans from the space. His body suddenly flew up. The red flying insect also paused for a moment before flying up as well. At this moment, Xiaohua shook his hand and several confinement talismans flew out, trapping the red flying insect from all directions. The red flying insect rushed left and right, but in the end, it couldn't dodge Xiaohua's confinement talismans. With a flash of light, the red flying insect was actually hit by several confinement talismans. Its wings struggled a few times, and just like the ice worm just now, it directly fell from the sky. Haha, Xiaohua was overjoyed when he saw this. He increased his speed and flew forward. Sure enough, when the red flying insect fell, a portion of the ice worms that were chasing after Xiaohua immediately separated and chased after the red flying insect. Why does it feel a little strange? After Xiaohua finished laughing, a trace of suspicion appeared in his heart. However, before he could think about it carefully, a sharp and urgent sound came from the distant valley. That sound was both loud and urgent, as if it wanted to pierce his ears. Following the sound, the several red flying insects that had scattered in all directions just now, as if they had received some kind of order, all changed directions and chased after Xiaohua. This was serious. Of the large group of ice worms that appeared just now, about 40% went out to chase after Li Xiaowen and the others. The remaining 60% followed behind the red flying insects. Now that the red flying insects were chasing after Xiaohua, wouldn't that mean that 60% of the ice worms were also chasing after him? Moreover, other than the group of ice worms that was chasing after Xiaohua, the other red flying insects were actually blocking Xiaohua from different directions. Are you kidding me? Xiaohua was a little dumbfounded. He had originally planned to let Li Xiaowen and the others lead the ice worms away. Who would have thought that in the end, he would actually be the one to lead so many ice worms away? Xiaohua whistled, and a trace of excitement appeared in his nervous heart. Xiaohua's figure could be seen flying back and forth amidst the encirclement of many red flying insects. At the beginning, Xiaohua was still a little unfamiliar with it. After being hit by several ice worms, a large piece of the iron cloak talisman was turned into ice. However, Xiaohua was not in a hurry. He did not immediately take out the spear tip. He wanted to wait until the ice had reached a certain degree before breaking it. Just like this, Xiaohua flew in a different direction from the others. He gradually approached the bottom of the valley, and this kind of flying made Xiaohua more and more proficient, more and more comfortable, more and more at ease. What's with that sound just now? How did it come out? It seems to be able to control the red flying insects. Could it be that I was wrong? Once Xiaohua was free, his thoughts turned rapidly. He began to think about that inexplicable sound. It seems the first time I was discovered by the ice worms, there was also this kind of sound. Moreover, if it wasn't for that sound, Li Xiaowen and the others might not have been discovered. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua began to pay attention to the pitch-black bottom of the valley. However, the bottom of the valley was very deep. At night, it was impossible to see clearly. Xiaohua's cultivation was insufficient, so he did not dare to go down. He could only be cautious. At the same time, Xiaohua secretly took out a pile of fireball talismans and confinement talismans from the space. He placed the fireball talisman in his left hand and held the confinement talisman in his right hand. Just like before, after flying for a while, he saw that he was free. With a shake of his hand, several confinement talismans were thrown out. Those red flying insects were admittedly agile, but after all, they could not compare to humans. After doing this several times, there would always be one flying insect that was hit by the confinement talisman and fell from the sky. When the flying insect fell, it also took some ice worms with it. Just after Xiao Hua hit 3 more red flying insects. Finally, from below Xiao Hua, a furious voice sounded. "Where did this wild cultivator come from? You actually dare to hurt my fire mushroom insect." Xiao Hua was overjoyed when he heard this. He shouted, "This young master has been waiting for you. You actually dared to plot against this young master. I'll let you see how powerful this young master is." As he spoke, he did not even look. With a shake of his left hand, more than 10 fireball talismans were activated by magic power. Like hailstones, they shot towards the source of the voice. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.